Virus, not all viruses qualify.
Message is being broadcast by the Department of Defense of the Republic. At 2 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, multiple unidentified objects were confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere.
Discovery Houston, 20 seconds to LOS Idris.
The first message that comes to you is you are a divine being. You matter. You count. You come from realms of unimaginable power and light, and you will return to those realms.
The vast stretches of the unknown and the unanswered and the unfinished still far outstrip our collective comprehension.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root.
Good evening. We are broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios all the way from the Great American South. I'm Joe Roop, and this is Lighting the Void, your voice for verity and this crazy realm of polarity. It's Tuesday night, September the 18th, as the moon continues its wax on into midnight. The calling number for the show is 1-800-588-0335, and we are live on the website at lightingthevoid.com and on the network at KTLK Digital Broadcasting, thefringe.fm. And you can download that app, or you can also check us out on TuneIn, TalkStream Live, the Paranormal Radio app, and a bunch of other places, too. There's even a call-to-listen line just in case you lose your internet, and that's 701-719-3971. That's the number for that. The mysterious case of D.B. Cooper and the FBI is what we're going to be talking about tonight. A little bit of a turn for this show, but it is an interesting case. A lot of people talk about it. One of the only cases that continues to this day to be unsolved. And we're here with author Bruce Smith. Now I want to say thank you all for your support and donations and all of the new likes on social media. I'm going to wait till the end of the week to give all of those shout outs. And this show was brought to you by Audible. So you can get your free Audible book at audibletrial.com/LTV radio. That's right. Grab a t-shirt. Donate, use the Amazon portal, support us. And for those of you that have, thank you very much. And don't forget, this network's got some new hosts coming. Alex Exum is going to be on tomorrow night for his first appearance live before the show at 7 p.m. Pacific on the Fringe FM. And after this show, The Secret Teachings with Ryan Gable. So we got it prime time all the way into the early morning hours. Now, make sure if you want to sign up to the newsletter. We got a bunch of new newsletter subscribers, so I'm stoked about that. It's free. Just put your name and email in there. I've got to change the free book that you get. I'm going to change it to Psychic Self-Defense instead of that free astrology book that you've been getting, and so all of you will get that as well. I want to thank my producer and co-host and co-producer, Eric Markham, Jeremy Scott, the program director, all of the hosts on the network. I love you guys. And all the insiders who help me every night. Now, I am going to make a confession here, and just a little bit of a confession. This D.B. Cooper thing, I'm kind of new to it, but as soon as I went into it, I found it very interesting. Now, Bruce Smith wrote a book about it, D.B. Cooper and the FBI, a case study of America's only unsolved skyjacking. And just to give you just a brief, I'll give you his brief on it. So in 1971, a man known as D.B. Cooper hijacked a Northwest Orient airliner flying from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. After exchanging the passengers at the Seattle airport for $200,000 and four parachutes. Now, he instructed the pilots to fly him to anywhere in Mexico. A few minutes after takeoff, he lowered the staircase and jumped into the chilly, rainy night skies north of Portland, and he has never been found since, and his identity is still unknown. There's been tons of investigations, 40 years of investigation, in fact, but apparently the FBI still doesn't know who Cooper was, if he survived, if nothing ever happened or if nothing's ever been found. But a young boy found, I believe, $5,800 in cash, and it just gets kind of choppy after that because everything gets real speculative. But Bruce Smith is here with us, and he's done a lot of study and research on this fascinating case. Kind of makes you wonder what the FBI is up to. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Bruce Smith. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. My pleasure. To start, it might be worthwhile to give a little bit of background about me and how I got into the D.B. Cooper case. And so you have, since you're kind of a rookie on this too, Joe, then perhaps and perhaps many of your listeners are new or fresh to the case. We'll spend a few minutes just kind of going over some of the basics. I've been an investigative newspaper reporter. And in 2008, my editors wanted me to cover an air show at a local airport in Pierce County, which the airport itself was maybe about 25, 30 miles southeast from Tacoma, which is where the SeaTac Airport, and where the exchange of money in D.B. Cooper and the passengers were released. So I live in D.B. Cooper country.
Nice.
And, and this air show was taking place in D.B. Cooper country. And as it turns out, one of the planes that really captured my fancy was an old, restored, single-wing plane called a Fairchild 24. As it turns out, when I was a kid back in New York, I had built a model of it, and I had never seen a real live version of the Fairchild 24. So I was oogling, the whole thing, and standing on my tiptoes and looking into the cockpit and the cabin. And this guy walks up to me and he says, "You like it?" I go, "I sure do." And he introduces himself. His name was Ron Foreman, and he was the owner and the pilot, and he was the guy that had restored the airplane. And we're talking about the plane and building models as kids, and he even pointed out that the rear seat had a little spot for a rosebud. So this was a luxury. This was the Mercedes-Benz of airplanes back in the 1930s, and in fact, the actual airplane I was looking at, the original owner, had been somebody, a Hollywood, a guy by the name of Charlie Bergen, who was a very famous vaudevillian actor in the 1930s in Hollywood. So after the introductory pleasantries with Ron, he says, "Why don't we get out of the hot broiling sun here and sit in the shade?" And we sat under the starboard wing, and he had some lawn chairs. And he opens up his ice chest, and he hands me an ice cold Coke. And it was one of those things on a hot day, man, that tastes good. So we're sitting back, and I look on the ground, and I see a book that says D.B. Cooper, something death, something legend, something. And I go, "Hey, Ron, are you into D.B. Cooper?" And he says, "Hell yeah, I just wrote that book, me and my wife. It just came out a week ago." So we started talking about D.B. Cooper. Now, when D.B. Cooper stole his airplane, I was 22. I was in college. But I was in New York, and back in those days, somebody was stealing an airplane about every other week. So this was not news to me at all. Some other guy, some guy out in Seattle, he's stealing an airplane, but he doesn't want to go to Cuba and go visit Fidel. He just wants to fly somewhere, and he jumps out. It's like, oh, big deal. So I was aware of it, but I didn't pay much attention to it. And nationally, the case did not capture the American imagination right off the bat, unlike today, where there is growing interest in this case. Because as you dig into it, this is one of those kinds of American mysteries that is big enough to have a lot of weirdness in it, but it's small enough that you can kind of wrap your head around it. And as an investigative reporter, I found the case to be remarkable in its ability to really reveal, to illuminate, to manifest exactly how law enforcement truly functions in the world. It is not like on TV. There are very few NCISs that function. There are very few SUV law and order type of folks. There's very few Lieutenant Bensons who can be creative and mentally manage a lot of conflicting and bizarre kinds of information and clues and not get overwhelmed. There are some things that law enforcement does very well, but it's clear that there are some things that they don't do well at all. And what they don't do well is solve complex cases that are innovative, creative, one of a kind, and that involve multiple jurisdictions over thousands of miles. And back in 1971, when D.B. Cooper stole his airplane, the FBI clearly could not connect the dots in the Cooper case. And to this day, we know that they're not connecting the dots very well, because 9/11 was allegedly a case of, well, we just couldn't connect the dots back then. And so this fundamental structural deficiency continues. And it's understandable. You don't go to the Department of Motor Vehicles to get a tune-up on your car. You just go to get your license renewed, and you're lucky if you can get out of the DMV within the hour. So bureaucracies are limited just by their size, and they're limited by the people who can thrive in those kinds of environments. A real good example of how the FBI functions and the internal frictions that exist between the grunt guys, the guys who are out there, gumshoes, pounding the pavement and driving the cars around and interviewing people and, just the facts, man, just the facts. On Netflix, you can see a couple great shows. Mindhunter is fascinating to show you the conflict between what the grunt guys are up against in terms of innovative or creative, out-of-the-box academic types who are wondering about different kinds of possibilities. What was the motivation of this criminal? What was the motivation for that kind of crime?
So what you're saying in real life is that there's no Columbos or Matlocks or that stuff isn't really there.
No, I haven't met them. I'm not putting the FBI down. I'm just saying that it's not like what we all think it is. And it is further hampered by the fact that the FBI and almost all cops, any law enforcement agency, certainly as a newspaper report on my local guys, the Sheriff's Department, Tacoma City Police, Seattle Police, things like that, and all journalists that I know will tell you the same thing. The cops only want you to know what they want you to know, and only when they want you to know it. So going anything beyond what is called the narrative or the party line is difficult. But you can do it now in the D.B. Cooper case because of the internet, because of shows like this, chat rooms that are popping up, and hackers that are getting involved that will drop tidbits of information that are just like time bombs, that are like, oh my God. And now, ironically, the FBI closed the case in 2016 because they said they had run out of credible leads, which I find remarkably stupid. It's uninformed. There's plenty of good leads that I don't think that they've sufficiently investigated, because right after they closed the case, the Travel Channel did a documentary on D.B. Cooper and funded additional investigation of the tie that they found on the airplane that D.B. Cooper was wearing, and they began to investigate the particles that electron microscopes were picking up on the tie. And they found 100,000 different kinds of strange minerals and elements like pure titanium, yttrium, barium, phosphors that would come from TV sets or oscilloscopes, all kinds of, stuff. There was stainless steel shards on the tie, but there were no regular steel. Now that's pretty bizarre. And the FBI, to my knowledge, has never investigated the crime to that degree.
Some of that stuff don't even sound like he was even in the airplane. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. You're saying some of this stuff comes from TVs. That just sounds a little weird.
Well, it does. So it means is that tie was in at least a manufacturing environment or a repair shop where TVs were being repaired, or in Boeing where oscilloscopes and monitors and other kinds of high-tech gear would be installed in modern airplanes like the supersonic transport back in 1971. Now, the question is, was Cooper a Boeing employee? Was Cooper actually involved in high-tech industries? Or did he just walk into Goodwill Industries one day and pick up a tie for $1, and it happened to be some engineer's tie, and he put it on and he's leading, we think, we're on to something, but all it is a wild goose chase. More to the point, when the FBI closed the case, they triggered a legal dynamic that is fantastic for guys like me. And that is, all of the information that the FBI had is no longer theirs. It is now ours. All their documentation is now public record. So they can't hold on to things legally. However, what they can do is restrict the flow of the release of all the documentation. And I and many other people have put in freedom of information requests, and I have been denied, and so have many other people, but not everyone. And so the people who are getting these documents are mostly academicians and historians, and there is now an underground of a release of this information. You can just fax it or make a PDF file, and all of a sudden it's going to be in 1,000 different hands within minutes. And so this information is becoming quite widespread, and some of the chat rooms that have developed over the past 10, 20 years as interest in the D.B. Cooper case has actually grown. There is now great vaults or depositories of FBI documents.
I know from John, I've spoken to John Greenwald from the blackvault.com, and he did tell me about what you talk about how they hold up processes on him. And so there were some documents that he would have to just keep on top of them for months and months and months until they finally just stopped giving him the runaround and would just give him the document. So, they do that. And that's part of the journey. That's part of the challenge. Excuse me. Nevertheless, progress is slow, but we're making lots of progress, I think. I'm satisfied, to my mind. And my book, D.B. Cooper and the FBI, a case study of America's only unsolved skyjacking, came out about 2 or 3 years ago as all of this information was kind of building into a crescendo. But it's going to be time real soon to come up with a third edition, now that we've had a couple of years' worth of looking at particularly what are called FBI 302s. 302s are summary notes of interviews with witnesses, like the crew or the passengers or eyewitnesses or things like that. And FBI typically does an interview with somebody such as an eyewitness in a pair. So one FBI agent is asking questions, and the other one is writing down notes, and afterwards then they'll kind of compare things, and there'll be a summary note, and it'll be written up, and that's the 302 that we're looking at right now. And there are now thousands. Supposedly there are 70,000 302s that are stashed away in boxes in God knows what warehouse in Virginia or Maryland. Well, how much do you know about just the facts of the case? Like, for instance, is there any justifiable reason why the FBI gave Cooper a 40-hour head start before they even went looking for him in the woods. Did they even justify that?
All they can do is explain is that the prevailing view, see, this comes down to the fact that no one had ever done this before. Most people didn't even know that you could actually exit a 727 aircraft safely. Whether you could parachute or not safely to the ground is a second question. The 727 is no longer in operation. But back in 1971, it was the most popular plane in the skies. It was a short-haul plane. And back in those days, there weren't any jetways at airports, except for maybe Los Angeles or LAX or JFK in New York. And when you went to a regional or a small local airport, you had to walk out of the terminal building, walk across the tarmac, and then the airlines would have to run up a stairs for you to get into the airplane. So Boeing built the plane that already had the staircase built in so people could get in and out. And that was the 727. And the airlines industry loved it. And so did skyjackers. And D.B. Cooper was the first one to jump, realizing that you could actually lower the staircase while in flight, walk down and jump out, and it's underneath the plane. So you're going to be safe from the engines, and you're not going to hit anything like a wing or anything like that. And once you jump off the bottom of the stairs, you're on your way. Now, in terms of, I got a little distracted from your question. Can you remind me what you were asking just before I went into that?
Just, I mean, you make some valid points, in your introductory in your book, and I'm just wondering, usually when, like, for instance, the 40-hour head start, things like that, the cigarette butts, did they justify why they didn't do any of this stuff?
They would say that most people that were evaluating the events, no one thought that Cooper was going to jump in the FBI. And at that time, that night, the only people who would think that, that's a smart, savvy, and safe thing to do would be commandos or expert parachute guys. The average Joe, because you got to remember, Cooper jumped out of his airplane in November, in the rain, in the dark, and he couldn't see where he was going because of the cloud cover, because it was raining. So that seemed like the FBI's initial evaluation was that this was a suicide event, and they just don't have, back then they didn't have the capacity to gear up for making local interventions. All of the searching, the ground searching, got outsourced to the local sheriffs and Washington State Highway Patrol. And on the night before Thanksgiving, there weren't a whole lot of cops on duty.
Right. The
FBI had to call all of their guys back in from leave, and it still took them a while to get up to full strength. And the next day, it seems as though only the true believers were back in the office. Everybody else was trying to manage turkey at home and the kids and the wife and granny and all of that. I don't have definitive statements on that from anybody, but reading the tea leaves, it seems like the FBI took the holiday off, at least mentally. Maybe the top guys continue to work. We do know that the case agent in Portland who handled skyjacking, his name is Ralph Himmelsbach, and he was later to become very famous as the public face of the D.B. Cooper investigation because he found the money on the beach that was discovered initially by the kid, that 8-year-old boy. And Himmelsbach really became a national figure at that point. But Himmelsbach was the only one that I know of that actually got his ass in gear. He jumped in he was a pilot. He jumped in his own private plane and he started flying around the forests where most of the aviation people at Northwest Airlines figured Cooper jumped, which was about 20 miles north of Portland, Oregon. And it's fairly rural, a mix of agricultural and fields and rolling hills and forests, and it's not particularly mountainous, and it's not necessarily wilderness, but there's plenty of trees around. So Himmelsbach fully expected to see D.B. Cooper dangling from the end of his parachute hung up in a tree. He didn't think he was going to have to zoom really low and look for some guy scurrying underneath the branches. And that was the initial perspective of the FBI in their aerial search for the next couple days. Basically, we're looking for a parachute in a tree. That's what we're looking for. And they never found one. So their initial expectations were defeated. And it proved to be a naive expectation. And that comes from an institutional ignorance. They had never seen anything like this before, so they didn't know what to expect, and they didn't know how to prepare for it. So that's why that's why the 40 hours, it took 40 hours to mobilize your ground teams and confirm from the flight engineers and discussion from the debriefing from the pilots about the actual flight characteristics. When somebody jumps out of a 727, there's going to be a bump effect. The pilots call it curtsy. The plane is going to wobble. The tail is going to come up. The nose is going to come down. So it's going to flutter in the air, and you're going to have to trim it out. And so the pilots did that about 7 or 8 minutes before they flew over the Portland urban area, they were flying 3 miles a minute. So that puts them about 20, 30 miles north of Portland. When you figure that once he jumped, the winds were going to push him to the north a little bit away from the direction of the plane. And that put him in the area of Ariel and Amboy. That whole landing zone scenario is still not nailed down. There's plenty of controversy. There's plenty of reasons to think that other places might have been where D.B. Cooper landed, whether he crashed and cratered himself, buried himself in the mud or whatever, or not, or walked away. We don't know. And there's still a lot of debate and doubt about where should we be looking for D.B. Cooper's body if he didn't make it. Nevertheless, the majority of people, and certainly the FBI, believe that it's somewhere in the Ariel and Amboy area north of Portland.
I wonder what would happen. I mean, and if you don't mind, I'm getting a lot of feedback. I think if you can turn your speakers down, I don't know. You're not wearing headphones, are you?
No, I'm not.
I'm getting the sound is coming back through the microphone.
All right.
If you can turn it down just enough to where you can hear me, I think we'll be fine.
Okay, I can hear you.
But I wonder why.
Are you still getting feedback?
No, it's good. We're good. I wonder why. Okay. This makes me think about 9/11 and all of the things that we call false flags and stuff. I mean, is there real incompetence here? Like the 9/11 report. Nobody knows the truth about that to this day, and I'm really starting to think, like you're talking about, between all these jurisdictions, we're wanting to think every little thing is a conspiracy, and maybe it is, but I'm starting to think, based on what you're telling me here, is that there's a lot of incompetence going on as well.
Incompetence, yes, but I would call it bureaucratic rigidity, rigid thinking, one-dimensional thinking. Think of the lousy English teachers you had in high school, and then, put a badge and give them a gun. A lot of FBI agents they're not poets. They're not philosophers. They're cops. They like catching bad guys. They don't like mysteries, particularly. Even the most innovative case agent that the FBI ever had on the D.B. Cooper case, his name was Larry Carr, and he really jump-started the whole thing with the Internet. He came on as the case agent in 2007, and he sold the idea that the FBI could form a private public partnership with people who wanted to be armchair sleuths, who knew how to rake in information from the Internet and could work with the FBI. And in many ways, it worked very, very well. And Larry Carr became an outspoken fount of information on the websites, particularly one that's known as the Drop Zone, which is a parachuting chat room website. And Larry gave us a lot of information and really could confirm and deny a lot of stuff, of speculations and things. And that's where, and when we began following his leads, that's where we began to see that institutionally, the FBI had a lot of problems because a lot of their paperwork is a mess. A lot of these 302s that I mentioned earlier are highly contradictory. And there doesn't seem to be sufficient oversight or supervision of somebody saying, hey, look, the passengers are saying this. The passengers are saying that the stewardess walked out of the plane and came back with the money, whereas the passengers are saying, no, the stewardess didn't leave the plane and get the money. No, FBI agents came onto the plane with the money. You know, that's a significant variation. So is that because people are lying, or was the information scrubbed, or there just wasn't anybody in charge at a really functional level where they could manage all of these agents, all of this information, all of these 302s? It takes a lot of skill to manage 70,000 different pieces of documentation from eyewitnesses. That's a lot of bus drivers, clerks, waitresses, taxi cab guys, we still don't know how Cooper got to the airport and got on the plane. Excuse me.
Right. So, well, we got to take our break here.
Okay.
This thing about this D.B. Cooper case kind of makes me wonder a lot about a lot of things, especially when it comes to our law enforcement. But we'll be right back, guys, with Bruce Smith. Don't go anywhere.
To Lighting the Void Radio.
The truth is out there.
There's something out here.
And so are we. KTOK Digital Broadcasting, The Fringe FM.
From Studio 303, it's the Stranger Than Fiction News for The Fringe FM, bringing light to the stories that surround us. Mummified human corpse filled with bees, wasps, and a squirrel discovered hanging from a tree. The partially mummified body of a man has provided an unusual home for the motley crew of woodland creatures. Scientists discovered wasps, honeybees, and even a squirrel nesting inside the corpse. The body was found hanging some 80 feet from the ground in a forest in southwestern Poland. The team thinks the corpse had remained undiscovered for about 13 years. The creatures were found when the body was transferred to Wrocław Medical University Forensic Medicine Department. You could read more of the disturbing details of this story at Newsweek.com. And there are some insects that taste with their feet and hear with their wings. Insects put their senses in strange places, from ears on their belly to noses on their legs and eyes on their genitalia. The looper moth in Mount Hood's National Forest is among a moth species that has a tympanum that works like an ear that's on their abdomen. For a butterfly, tasting with your feet isn't gross. In fact, it's a great way to find a delicious place to eat. The idea of walking around tasting our floor tile all day made us wonder, what are some other strange places insects have their sensory organs? It's a human-centric question, but we're only human. You can read more interesting details about insects at this article at nationalgeographic.com. And a mysterious environmental incident leaves Krymen City without birds. Armyansk, a city on the Russian-occupied Crimea Peninsula, has been left without any kind of birds after a mysterious chemical incident at a nearby Krymen Titan plant. On August 23rd, an unknown substance spewed into the atmosphere, covering everything in a rust-like plaque and immersing a foul odor. Social media was buzzing with reports and photos of houses, cars, and even plants covered in the mysterious substance. But occupation authorities ignored them for several days. At first, people started noticing that apart from an occasional crow, there were no more birds in Armyansk. But then things got progressively worse when more and more residents of Krymen City began experiencing breathing problems. But local authorities and media have completely ignored them. You can read all the details at odditycentral.com. And a bicyclist photographs a giant walking worm. A young Eric Ivan went out for a bicycle ride as he normally does. However, an extra-normal event befell him on the scenic highway in Mexico near the summit known as Skull Hill. The photograph shows a sort of a giant worm that appears to be walking erect. The story on the photograph is published at inexplicada.blogspot.com. And it's time for this edition of the Stranger Than Fiction's Fun Fact. The toothpaste named Colgate in Spanish actually translates to "go hang yourself." And that wraps it up for another edition of the Stranger Than Fiction news right here on the Fringe FM. I'm Vance Nesbitt. Stick around for more Lighting the Void with your host, Joe Roop.
This is Jason Lindgren from Crow 777 Radio, and you can hear us 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Saturday night here on the Fringe FM.
This is Cortana from Shift Happens, telling you to pour a glass and park your ass, because you're listening to KTLK, the Fringe FM. Shifthead.
Folks, this is very important information. What's to be said about CBD? AncientLifeOil.com. Our CBD is made from hemp and has 0.003 THC, which means this wonderful product won't get you high, no matter what amount you take. What does CBD do for the body? My hands are tied. But you can Google CBD benefits and be astounded. When you're finished reading, you'll want to log on to AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. And purchase. Life is good when you feel good. People are tired of pain. People are asking for non-GMO organic products to help them with, you fill in the blank. Legal in 49 states, and again, our CBD is made from hemp. Ancient Life Oil is about helping people one by one by one. If you wonder how good the product is, the CEO takes it every day without miss. AncientLifeOil.com. That's AncientLifeOil.com. Have a great day.
Howdy, this is Catalina, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. I'm your host, Joe Roop. This is the show about D.B. Cooper. Lighting the Void is doing a D.B. Cooper show. And the one thing that I've said to Bruce is I can't believe, I guess the biggest thing about this case, the famous skyjacking case, is I can't believe no one's found a body. It didn't float up. There's not a bone anywhere. No DNA. Nothing. Nowhere. Not to be found. And that's the hardest part. And I know some of you are like, oh man, there's so much more to this case than that. But to me, that's the one thing that stands out the most. Is usually in just about every case, a body turns up somewhere down the road or something. And so there's a lot of speculation that this guy's still alive, that he's certain people. I actually seen that too, and I'll let you comment on that. But Do you know anything about the background of this guy, like where he came from? Because that's the mystery, right? Who the guy was to begin with.
There is nothing known about D.B. Cooper's background, and I write in my book, and I believed it when I wrote it, and I believe it now. D.B. Cooper came from nowhere, and when he jumped out of his airplane, he returned to nowhere. It's as simple as that, as crazy as that sounds. So I'd like to, Joe, just spend a couple of minutes giving some of the basics to the folks who maybe just, this might be the first time they're hearing about D.B. Cooper in any kind of substantive fashion. Sure. So the D.B. Cooper skyjacking started on the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving in 1971. So it's almost like 47 friggin' years ago. It's quite a while now. D.B. Cooper was a man about 45, 50 years old. He was considered middle-aged. He looked like a businessman. He was wearing a black suit, black tie. He had a black raincoat. And it was a rainy day in Portland. And it was in the mid-40s. And he looked like a typical mid-level kind of manager, businessman type of a passenger that was heading back to home on Thanksgiving weekend. And he got in line for a ticket. A ticket from Portland to Seattle back in 1971 was $20. By the way, your listeners may be interested to know that Northwest Orient Airlines, when they refueled the plane for D.B. Cooper's getaway flight, the entire bill for refueling the plane was $116. So things were very different back then. You could get on a plane with a gun, with a weapon, with a knife. D.B. Cooper was had a knife with him. It's believed he had a pocket knife. He was one of the last passengers on a plane, and he sat in the last seat, row 18 of Northwest Orient Flight 305 that had been hopscotching across the country. It started earlier in the day in Washington, D.C., and was making the last flight of its day, flying from Portland to Seattle, and the crew was going to fly back home to Minneapolis. They hubbed out of Minneapolis and meet their own families. They all lived and worked out of Minneapolis. As the plane is rolling down the runway, D.B. Cooper, as he's sitting in the back seat, turned to the stewardess that was in the jump seat in the galley, which was right next to him. He was only a foot or two away, and handed her a note. The stewardess was the former Miss Arkansas, and she thought it was another guy hitting on her, so she didn't read the note and just slipped it into her pocket. 2 seconds later, as the plane is off the runway and the wheels are retracting, he says, "Miss, I think you really need to read that note." She did, and the flight attendant freaked out. That was Florence Mucklow, and she became very flustered, and the note said, "I have a bomb, and I want you to sit next to me. You're being hijacked." She was able to compose herself enough to get into the seat. D.B. Cooper moved into the middle seat, and she sat in where he was formerly sitting on the aisle. And D.B. Cooper opened a briefcase and showed her that there was 6 sticks that were red, and Florence assumed they were dynamite. And D.B. Cooper said that that was his bomb and had batteries and explosive devices within the briefcase. And he showed her a little switch and said, "All I have to do is connect these, and it's done." And he instructed her to take a note. And she started writing on a scrap piece of paper. He said, "I want $200,000 in cash, and I want 4 parachutes. I want 2 front, and I want 2 back parachutes. When we land in SeaTac, I'll exchange the passengers for the money and the parachutes. And no funny stuff. Now let's get the show on the road." And at that point, Florence couldn't handle anymore. She stood up. She signaled to another flight attendant by the name of Tina, and Tina turned out to be the real hero of the whole incident.
A flight attendant.
She was a flight attendant. She was 22. and very good looking. And she took Florence's place in the seat. Florence took the note up to the cockpit and dropped it in Scotty's lap, is what the guy flying the plane, Bill Radicek, told me. Scotty was Captain William Scott. He was in the captain's seat. Radicek was the co-pilot, second officer sitting in the co-pilot's chair to the right. And there was a third officer by the name of Harold Anderson, Andy Anderson. And he was handling flight controls, weather, fuel consumption, navigation, communications, all of that. Scotty was a vet of World War II, but he freaked. And Radicek had to really struggle with him to control the aircraft on takeoff. And they finally got the aircraft under control, and Radicek and Scotty made a deal. Scotty was going to fly in the SeaTac, and Radicek was going to handle the developing situation on the plane. And Anderson was going to handle communications to flight control, Northwest Orient, and the FBI, who were pretty quick to respond. They flew, it was a 20-minute flight up to Seattle, but the parachutes and the money had already been gathered. The FBI, to their credit, had already anticipated these kinds of high leveraged, high money value extortion crimes, and had stockpiled in 200 field offices around the country at least $250,000 in small bills. So they were ready for D.B. Cooper, and I applaud them greatly for that. So the money was at the airport lickety-split. The parachutes were a little bit more difficult to get together, and to this day, there is a lot of controversy surrounding which parachutes were delivered, what parachute D.B. Cooper used, and that determines a lot of trying to read the tea leaves on what kind of skydiver D.B. Cooper was. Was he smart enough to get himself into trouble? Or was he a real pro? Was he a commando, an expert kind of guy? It's hard to discern those kinds of bits and pieces because the narrative has been so corrupted over the past 47 years to serve political purposes. The first major political purpose was we want to discourage other skyjackers, so the FBI put out the word is that Cooper probably died. It was just too tough. The reality is that everybody else who tried to jump, they made it to the ground. And that opens up the question, if everybody else was able to jump out of the plane that they stole, how come D.B. Cooper didn't make it? So,
believe it or not, I didn't even know this.
There were 14.
Yeah, that other people tried to jump.
Copycats in the following 10 months. It was very popular. I mean, doing the Cooper jump, and 5 made it to the ground with their money, and it's now believed, depending on who you talk to within the FBI or within the private investigatory community, how much weight to put on each copycat. But there are a number of people who think that D.B. Cooper actually was one of his own copycats, and that he lost the money, or he wanted to get more money, or, hey, I did it once, let me do it twice, that kind of thing. And got a little greedy and got caught on a second jump. And so those two people are Richard McCoy and a fellow by the name of Frederick Hahnemann. Frederick Hahnemann has come into prominence in the last year because it is now known that Frederick Hahnemann had extensive CIA contacts in Vietnam, and his whole career basically, he looked like he was some kind of contract operative for the CIA. He worked as a technician. He was definitely an electronics expert with Bendix, and worked on a lot of radios and weapon control on helicopters in Vietnam. But it seemed like he did a lot of other things. He also had a lot of political contacts in Honduras, and it was not found in Honduras. The only reason why Hahnemann came into custody is because he turned himself into the U.S. Embassy in Tegucigalpa, Honduras, because he said, I was afraid for my life and I didn't want to be on the run anymore. The ransom money, he stole $300,000, and that money is still not fully recovered as far as is known publicly. And the question is, why? And where did that money go? and how come Hahnemann isn't talking about it? And getting information on Frederick Hahnemann is more difficult than getting information about D.B. Cooper. So we have multiple levels of mystery here. And so it's a question of basically how far down this rabbit hole you want to go. Nevertheless, back to the skyjacking. They fly around Seattle for 2 or 3 hours. Finally, all the parachutes and money are there. And Cooper is ready to make the swap. So they land. They don't come to the terminal. They park at the far end of a runway. Northwest Orient's a little thrown off. They have to go over to United, borrow a couple buses to get all the passengers. And they do a roll call. The FBI does a roll call on the bus with the passengers and 2 of the stewardesses. And they find out that in the manner of the day, where the flight manifests were last name first and first initial, they were looking for Cooper D. And there was a Cooper M on board, a Michael Cooper, but they were looking actually for a Cooper D, a Dan Cooper. And so the word went out to Portland PD, we're looking for a D. Cooper. You got any bad boys down there that would like to steal an airplane on the day before Thanksgiving for a little extra cash? And one of the detectives told the FBI, says, well, I got a cat burglar down here who, when he's sober, he robs houses. And his name is D.B. Cooper. And the Fed said, pick him up. And so he did. And there was a newspaper reporter saying, hey, buddy, Joe, where are you going? He says, well, I got to get the Feds want me to pick up D.B. Cooper, so I'm going to go pick him up. And so that went into the editors that the Portland police were looking for D.B. Cooper. And that went over the airways that the skyjacker was D.B. Cooper. And by midnight, everybody was calling the skyjacker D.B. Cooper, including the FBI, even though they knew his name was really Dan Cooper, or at least the alias. No one really believes that the skyjacker used its actual name. And nevertheless, the plane was on the ground for about 2 hours. The FBI tried to sabotage the refueling. It ultimately took 4 fuel trucks to refuel. There were multiple problems with some of the machinery and also with the FBI's attitude. The guy who was in charge of the cockpit at that time, Bill Radicek, told me, he says, yes, I raised my voice to the FBI. I told them that lives were at stake here and no more fooling around. Fill her up. We got to get out of here. The skyjacker is getting anxious, and I don't want him to pull the plug on the bomb and blow everybody up. The FBI officially was committed to the strategy espoused by Northwest Orient and all airlines at that time, which was to comply fully with the demands of the skyjacker. The last thing any airlines executive wanted was dead passengers, and he didn't want a plane in flames, and he didn't want any holes in the fuselage because the cowboys at the FBI wanted a gun battle and all of that. So the FBI knew that. A month prior, there had been a small-time skyjacking where the FBI refused to refuel the plane and shot out the tires and triggered a gun battle and ended up with the pilot dead, the hostage dead, and the skyjacker dead. And it's my understanding that incident is called 58 November. And it is the only time that I'm aware of in the history of the FBI that the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover have been successfully sued for wrongful death by the family of the hostage who was killed. So that was fresh on, that was 2 weeks earlier, 3 weeks earlier. So that's fresh on the minds of the FBI agents. But nevertheless, an FBI agent apparently did sneak onto the plane, but was turned around. How? I don't know. And that whole incident is shrouded in mystery. I got that information from a passenger who was an attorney and knew the FBI agent from the courts, and in fact had a conversation with the FBI agent as he was walking down the aisle, who had confirmed to him, yes, there's a skyjacking in progress. He's on board. I'll talk to you later and give you more names, more information. That passenger is named Larry Feingold. And he told me that the FBI agent was named John. You can't remember the guy's last name. So at 7:30, everything is calmed down on the plane. It's fueled up, ready to go. And Cooper says, let's take off, get me out of here, and fly anywhere to Mexico. But leave the staircase down. The pilot said, no, wait, what do you mean leave the staircase down? We're taking off. He says, no, I'll leave it down. And he says, I know it can be, we can take off with the staircase down. The pilots didn't know that, and nobody in flight control at Northwest Orient knew that either. And so they reneged on that. He said, well, if I can't lower the staircase, I'm going to keep Tina on board with me. She's already been on board for 5 hours. Well, we're going to make it 6, and she's going to lower the staircase for me and help me with that. So there was tension right to the very end. They take off and head south, and Cooper gives the pilots very unusual instructions. He said, don't fly over 10,000 feet altitude. Leave the cabin unpressured. Leave your wings flaps set at 15, and have your landing gear, the wheels down, and lock them, and don't go over 200 miles an hour. Now, that's very unusual flight configuration, but Cooper knew that the plane would be able to successfully fly at that speed, which was also the ideal for jumping out of a jet aircraft. And nowadays, there are lots of sport parachuters who jump out of 727s and other jet aircraft at 200 miles an hour with the flaps at 15. And they recapitulate the D.B. Cooper jump, kind of like celebrate their kind of like erstwhile hero here. So anyway, Cooper spends about 30 minutes by himself. He lowers the staircase, and Tina goes back into the cockpit, and she's the last one to see D.B. Cooper. The last thing she saw him do was that he cut up a parachute, one of the reserve parachutes, one of the front parachutes, and he cut some of the shroud lines from it and started wrapping a weave around the bank bag and started lashing it to himself. And that's the last we know. What Cooper did with all the extra time is not known to anybody. Nevertheless, 3 hours later at 11 o'clock at night, the plane landed at Reno for a refueling stop because they were running out of gas because they were running with so much drag, with the wheels down and the wing flaps set for a takeoff or a landing for slow speed landings. And they were out of gas. And when they got to Reno, Cooper wasn't on board. One of the back chutes wasn't on board, and the other unused front chute wasn't on board. There was no money, and there was no bomb. And nobody has seen any of that ever since. No body, no parachute, none of the money, except for about $6,000 that was found on the beach at the Columbia River 8 years later. And adding to the mystery, nobody knows how the money got to the beach or when it got there. It was in very decomposed condition, and nobody can figure out how money could get so decomposed and yet hold together to end up being basically integrated, integral.
So this definitely sounds like a commando or somebody. I'm thinking about average Joes here, or somebody that might have just jumped out of a plane a couple of times. Nobody can do that kind of stuff. I mean, you got to have training to do this kind of stuff.
Oh, exactly. And I think that was one of the reasons that hampered the FBI, because I think very few FBI agents could envision doing anything like this. And if they couldn't do it, why would D.B. Cooper do it? And so they had to really envision a different kind of human being than they were used to dealing with. And not a lot of people can do that. It takes a lot of imagination. And it takes a lot of personal perseverance to trust yourself when everybody in the room is looking at you like you have two heads, when you're saying, no, maybe it was a commando. A commando, an American commando? Are you kidding me? They'd never do that. An American commando steal his own, an American airplane? No. This just utter disbelief. So you have to remember, this is 1971. America first, yada, yada, yada. We're in Vietnam. We're going to win it if we can just hold out. But, if it wasn't for those hippie liberals,
And $200,000 is, back then, is quite a bit of money. I mean, that's like $1 million today, wasn't it? I mean, I'm getting my times right here.
Yes, it is. Yeah. It's not a lot, but not a little.
Yeah, this is interesting. Yeah, we got to take another break. I forgot to tell you before the show, we got a break on the halves. But if you guys got any questions, or you can put them in the chat room, but just make sure that you put it in caps. Or if you want to call in, the number's 1-800-588-0335. If you want to call in as well, we'll be right back with Bruce Smith. We're talking D.B. Cooper tonight. Stick around.
How you doing today, guys? This is Garrett Lee.
And this is Randy Warner.
We're the hosts of Healers and Hellraisers, and you're listening to The Fringe FM.
Hi, this is Sammy. Join us in the Deep South as we're lighting the void with Joe Roop on The Fringe FM.
Live for 3 hours every Saturday night. It's a show that engages the mind, makes you think, and maybe even challenge what you think you know. Hi, I'm Jeremy Scott of Into the Paranormal, where we talk about topics that are anything but mainstream, somewhere between abnormal and paranormal. Bring an open mind and join us for Into the Paranormal, live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on The Fringe FM.
From birth, we have been conditioned to conform to what is normal, conditioned to adhere to authority, and conditioned to repeat what has been told to us as truth. I'm Ryan Gable, and here at The Secret Teachings Radio, I've interviewed hundreds of great guests and done extensive unique research into subjects that span from the paranormal and the occult to health, philosophy, and history. I personally have no affiliations or agenda, except to use objective critical thinking in my analysis of every subject discussed, to empower myself with information and hopefully allow you to do the same. If you want to join me, tune into the Secret Teachings radio broadcast, airing live Monday through Friday from midnight to 3 a.m. U.S. Pacific Standard Time on the Fringe FM. For more information, you can visit our website at www.thesecretteachings.info or email me at rdgable@yahoo.com.
Reclaim your active lifestyle with Angioprim. Angioprim is the original liquid oral chelation supplement. Chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in your veins and arteries that can cause blockages. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. Find out more. Go to angioprim.com. Talk to a trained consultant by calling Angioprim toll-free 877-882-7221.
Hey, it's Grace. Can we talk about something serious for a minute? Your age. Getting old has its perks. But remember, being a few years younger, you know, your hair was thicker, you didn't have so many wrinkles, that extra weight wasn't haunting you, and you just felt better. Well, we can't turn back the clocks and go back 10 or 15 years, but you can start feeling and looking 10 or 15 years younger with Nature's Youth RSF. It's a doctor-formulated daily supplement that helps your body maintain its peak performance and fight the aging process. Imagine sleeping better, looking better, and feeling better. See how Nature's Youth RSF has helped thousands of people just like you at nature'syouth.com. nature'syouth.com. Imagine how it will feel when your family and friends are asking you what you did to look so good. Your secret will be Nature's Youth RSF. It's time to start looking better and feeling better. Learn more and order your Nature's Youth RSF at nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com. That's nature'syouth.com.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Want to know what's on The Fringe FM? Check out our schedule at thefringe.fm. Hey, Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone app or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere. You know, I'm thinking if it were me and I was in that area when D.B. Cooper made that jump, I'm thinking he hit a tree, a nasty pine top. There's money scattered everywhere. I'm going to go find some money. That's probably what I'm going to do. And according to some stories, that's actually what happened. A lot of people went out there and just started looking for 20s and $100 bills. I mean, I don't blame them. If the guy's not a commando, I'm thinking he hit a tree.
More than likely. There were plenty of trees to hit. Now, assuming that the landing zone where D.B. Cooper actually landed was in the Ariel and Amboy, Washington area, the likelihood of hitting a tree is about 50-50 because there were plenty of farms and pastures, and he could have landed in there just as easily. But we don't know. But if he hit a tree,
he's dead.
And died, his parachute would be dangling there. And they never found a parachute. So the question is, could D.B. Cooper have tied everything that was not found on the plane? Could he have tied it all in one big, huge bundle to serve as an extraction device, like extra rope, deflate all of the parachutes, take them out of the bags, and shimmy down out of a tree using all this extra gear? He had hundreds of feet of rope, 50 feet of a parachute. He had quite a bit of material he could have used, and he had all night to do it. One way or the other, D.B. Cooper was on the ground at 8:30 in the pitch black, in the rain, in the dark, and nobody was flying overhead looking for him until 9 o'clock the next morning. So he had 13 hours all to himself.
Somehow I'm starting to think that he knew that he was going to have time.
Well, let's add one more hopper. Let's add one more thing into the hopper. There are a number of people. Now, if D.B. Cooper was a commando, and when you talk to people who actually have served in the military as commandos who do this kind of thing, for a living, SEAL Team 6, whatever. If he had all the knowledge that he displayed in terms of how to set up the airplane, wing flaps at 15, leave the wheels down, if he had that kind of information, which was top secret information at that time, he might have had access to top secret level contacts and a network. And were there commandos on the ground? Did he have an extraction team? And did he have state-of-the-art communication gear? And did he have a whole squad of guys positioned all along the I-5 corridor ready to extract them, knowing that there was going to be most of the night before anybody started looking? So that's something that has to be considered. And that's not something that people talk about very easily, is if D.B. Cooper made it, how did he get away? And how did he take everything with him? So
it's like he's a ghost.
Exactly. So
they searched the plane. I mean, as soon as that plane landed, they were all over it, even though they knew he jumped out, right? I'm thinking What if this guy just threw a dummy down there and about $6,000 in cash and told the crew, I'm not really going to jump, cut the crew in, hide me on the plane somewhere. And there really is no body because he never jumped. I'm just, all kinds of weird stuff's going through my head now.
Yeah. Welcome to the DB Cooper world. These kinds of thoughts are ubiquitous. Everybody has got these kinds of things, particularly at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, lying in bed. You got to remember, the guys in the cockpit are super duper patriotic Americans. Ratajczak told me, he said it was war. He wanted to get us. I wanted to get him. Ratajczak did not want to fly over what it was known as the Victor 23 Airways. When you fly south out of SeaTac, and you're only at 10,000 feet, because all the big mountains are higher than 10,000 feet, you're really restricted to a particularly narrow air corridor space known as Victor 23, south out of Seattle, over Portland, through the Midlands of Oregon, and then you have to get pretty fancy and go east because the mountains at the Oregon-California border are kind of high. So it's not all that easy to fly at 10,000 feet to Mexico, which is one reason why they ended up in Reno for a refuel. So Ratajczak wanted to fly out over the ocean, and he told me, he says, let's see how long DB Cooper can tread water out in the ocean with 22 pounds of 20s tied to his waist. And he sounded like a real warrior. He sounded like a real patriotic, gung-ho kind of guy. So it's hard for me to imagine that him or Scotty, the guy who flew the hump for the Flying Tigers back in World War II, would go into collusion with this guy. Andy Anderson was of similar ilk. All of them had distinguished careers for the rest of their lives with Northwest Orient. And there's been a lot of speculation. There's even been some TV shows about Tina Mucklow, the flight attendant who spent 5 hours with D.B. Cooper, falling in love with D.B. Cooper. And Cooper ended up being an FBI agent, so he could learn from the inside how far the investigation into the skyjacking was going. There's all kinds of speculative kinds of things, and I don't give much credence to any of it. I think something much more bizarre happened, something much more exciting, much more dramatic. So,
what do you think? I'm curious. What do you think that happened? I mean, we're just speculating.
If I had to put money on a bet, certainly I wouldn't put a lot of money on a bet. But if I had to put money on a bet, I would say Cooper was a commando and he had an extraction team. If I had more money and I had to place a second bet, I would say it is plausible that this was a rogue operation, false flag, designed to create public awareness of how weak American aviation airline safety was. Where you get on a plane with a gun. Are you kidding me? Come on. Now, politically, in 1971, the airlines were faced with a very interesting dilemma. Even if they wanted to improve airline safety in a particular airline, so let's say Pan American or TWA, which were the major carriers back then, it wouldn't do much good in terms of safety unless everybody did it. And everybody did it with all the same kinds of equipment and all the same kinds of regulations. You were going to need a TSA like you have now, where all the airports are involved, all have the same kind of screening methodology. All the TSA agents have the same kind of training, so you don't have any weak links in the chain. To do this, you're going to need federal oversight. You're going to need federal management of this kind of program. And you're going to have to be able to spread out the cost equally over every single plane ticket. You don't want the passengers of Pan Am paying for the safety of passengers who are flying Delta. So, you have to make sure that the costs are spread out. And so if the DB Cooper skyjacking was designed to build this kind of political momentum, it's plausible. Most people in law enforcement that I've talked to don't think that is true. Most people that I've talked to in aviation don't think that this is true either. So I'm rolling a rock up a very steep hill on this question. But it's something that I consider.
Has anyone ever told you has anyone ever contacted you, or did you ever get any weird emails or phone calls? Like somebody had some answers because usually when people go investigate and stuff like this and write a book about it, they get called disinfo. I've even been called a disinfo agent. It's crazy. And when it comes to conspiracy, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole down here, but nobody really knows what's going on. But have you ever had anybody contact you that told you that maybe you were on to something but didn't reveal their identity? It's hard for me to think that didn't happen, that you didn't get some weird tip from somebody or something.
I've been waiting 10 years for it, and it hasn't happened yet, Joe. Fine. What I do get is I get the clam-ups. Tina Mucklow and her family have slammed the door in my face 11 times. Every FBI agent that I've ever talked to, he gives me his sanitized official story initially. Be very pleasant on the phone. And then when I start pushing him, he hangs up on me. Every single one. That is beyond discouraging. That in itself is a clue to something. The passengers most of them have passed away. There's only a few left. All the flight attendants are alive, but none are talking to anybody. The crew is not talking publicly to anybody. Although occasionally a couple do make appearances on documentaries, particularly the History Channel documentary that came out in 2016. But they're not being interviewed by anybody like me. They're only getting asked softball questions, and they're only being asked general questions about the case. Tina Mucklow did not speak to anyone in public for 30 years, and she went into a cloistered convent for 12 of those years. And when I go back to the nuns, they clam up and walk out on me. It's interesting seeing a nun walk out on you, walk out of an interview. I had flashbacks of 7th grade of a nun being so angry she turns red in the face. Yeah, well, that happened again. Yeah, so.
I've never had anybody on the show say a nun walked out on them. That's hilarious.
What can I tell you? All right. Overall, I also do say, and I do believe, that we're going to solve the case eventually. I think forensic science. Yes, I think forensic science continues to get more sophisticated. We're going to have more clues. We're going to have more information. Right now, we're investigating the tie, the 100,000 different kinds of particles. DNA, there's 3 different samples of DNA smeared on the tie. We don't know whose it is. It could be D.B. Cooper's. It could be a Joe Blow's. It could be an FBI agent. But our analysis of DNA is going to get much better over time. And I also think someone on a deathbed confession kind of thing is going to come forward. And I also think, and your listeners might have a perspective on this, there's something that I call remote viewing, and I have a chapter on remote viewing in my book. And I think that is a science that will be continued to be developed and considered more reliable. Right now, remote viewing, most people know about it as psychic sleuthing, or being a psychic and trying to read the tea leaves. But it really is a state of consciousness, a self-induced trance, to begin to try to transcend the barriers of time and space, so that we can really begin to examine the actual events of the Cooper skyjacking. I have a whole I've done a lot of work along those lines. I've done a lot of remote viewing on the D.B. Cooper case. My chapter reveals my personal experiences. My success is modest in the extreme, but I do believe that I was on to something. I'm not a very good remote viewer. I've reached out to a number of people who are professional and advanced, skilled remote viewers. Most famously David Morehouse and Joe McMonagle. Perhaps those folks you could invite them on your show and ask them about the D.B. Cooper case. But their work with the Stargate program for the Army down at Fort Detrick is very well known and is very significant, and that should be followed up. And so,
well, according to some of these guys that I've talked to, just real quick, let me tell you, these remote viewers, they can actually get on the plane, sit next to the guy. If they're good, as good as some of them say they are, sit next to the guy, look at him, identify him, and see the whole thing go down. You bring up a good point, actually. That would be a great show. I wonder why nobody's done that yet.
Well, there you go. You're going to be in the Emmys next year, all right? And I had this dream about being a remote viewer that was exactly like this. In my dream, I transcend time and space using my meditative technique, and I'm actually on the plane, and I'm wearing what I normally wear, which is basically jeans and just wool shirts and polar fleece vests and jackets and things like that, and I look like I've just walked out of REI, and I'm wearing my press credentials, my lanyard around my neck, and I walk up to seat 18E, and I said, "Excuse me, Mr. Cooper, do you mind if I sit next to you?" He looks me up and down. He nods his head to the left, say, "Yeah, sure, kid." And I sit down next to him, and he looks at me. He looks at my credentials, and he said, You're from the future, aren't you? You're not from this time." I said, "That's right." He said, "Well, then you're my ticket out of here."
What?
That was my dream.
When did you have that dream? How long ago was that?
About 3 or 4 years ago.
See, and I know you're telling me the truth because it's so profound.
In the book.
You remember it. You know what I mean? I've had dreams like that were so profound. And I'm 36. Most people forget about stuff when they were 5 years old, but if it's that profound, you never forget about it.
Yeah, and if I'm thinking about it, and we're talking about it, I wonder who else is thinking about it and talking about it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for real. But they were talking in the chat room here. I forgot to bring up about the height of the jump from the plane, saying that he couldn't breathe. And I mean, that is something to take into consideration. At 10,000 feet, they do. How far up was he again? Where did he jump from? Was it 10,000 feet? He told them, "Don't fly me over 10,000 feet." And that was for two reasons. One is to maintain consciousness, because over 10,000 feet, you will begin to get lightheaded and begin to lose cognitive capacities. Also, too, the doors and the pressuring devices and the seals work differently on an aircraft, and he wouldn't have been able to access the aft stairs over 10,000 feet. There would have been automatic sealing devices activated. So he knew quite a bit about the 727. And these dimensions, Boeing had done a lot of tests on how to skydive out of a 727. And it's now believed that it was one of the selling points to the military is that you could use this for a jump ship, that you could use a 727 as a transport for your commando teams. And they could jump out, and they could fly in and out of an LZ at 500 miles an hour. And when they're about to jump, you slow it down to 200. They jump, and then you speed it back up before the MiG-21s can get on your tail, and you get out of there. So you've interviewed a lot of military people to verify a lot of this information.
Yeah. Now, the pilots knew that, and so the pilots began creeping up to 11,000 feet to see if they could trick D.B. Cooper into passing out or acting crazy or stumbling around and all that kind of stuff. So when they were beginning their descent into Reno, they were at 11,000 feet, but Cooper was long gone. So the dynamics of how thin the air gets and when was very much at play that night. but your listener, I believe, is incorrect that Cooper was in danger at 10,000 feet.
It does. It makes me think of the guy that jumped, and I was telling you about that during the break, the Red Bull jump from space. I mean,
oh my God.
You got to think, like, if I've never jumped out of a plane, this guy couldn't have been a regular Joe, and even if I wanted to, I could probably go on 10 or 20 jumps locally, and, you know, they start you with tandem jumps, and then you get better at it, but no average Joe is going to attempt what this guy did. There's no way in my mind that this guy could have been a citizen. He had to have been military, special training, special ops. Had to have been some type of military, even airborne.
Yeah, and the guys in airborne will tell you that too.
Which then makes me think it was an inside job.
A lot of special forces in Vietnam have been. Have you ever heard of MACV-SOG? You ever interview anybody from MACV-SOG?
No.
All right, MACV-SOG stands for Material Assistance Command Vietnam Special Operations Group. These guys were special forces who were pulled out of the Army. They were 5th Special Forces. They got pulled out of the Army, got mustered out, got reassigned to the CIA, and were on the CIA payroll and sent back to Vietnam as MACV-SOG. And what they did was that they ran recon missions outside of Vietnam. So these were American soldiers going into Laos, Cambodia, and on occasion North Vietnam to basically make things rough for the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese. Blow up stuff, bring back intel, that kind of stuff. They signed, as one guy told me, he says, I signed a lot of pieces of paper, so I can only tell you some things. But most of those commitments to silence and secrecy have been waived over the last few years, and the SOG guys are riding up a storm, probably to take care of their PTSD. And so there's a ton of books about the actions of the MACV-SOG people. And there are 2 guys. One is Sergeant Billy Waugh, and the other is Major John Plaster. And they have written extensively about their SOG experiences and their whole military careers and things like that. And they are utterly convinced that D.B. Cooper was a SOG guy. In fact, they name him and they say Ted Braden, Sergeant Ted Braden. And I write extensively about Braden. And I don't think Braden was D.B. Cooper. But I think D.B. Cooper probably was somebody like Sergeant Ted Braden. And I think if I had more money to make a bet, I'd make a second bet, and I'd bet on who dat. Who dat is the guy, is what we're going to say when we find out through DNA analysis or a confession, or we find some guy with Cooper 20s in his under his mattress, and it's definitive that this was D.B. Cooper. We're going to find out the guy, and everybody in the world is going to say, who the hell was that guy? So that's my second bet.
Do you think he's still alive?
I do.
Kind of makes you wonder if he could be listening right now.
I say that because I think the temptation to honor him on his death for what he accomplished by pulling off the D.B. Cooper heist would be too juicy for people to pass up. Something else you have to remember, though, my observation of guys who are commandos, MACV-SOG, people who live in the military, who are committed to the military, make a life of the military, they live in very different environments than I do and most people do. They live on military reservations, or they live in suburbs that ring around the military reservations, and their friends and everybody they hang out with, and their wives and their girlfriends and everything, the wives know not to ask questions, and the guys know not to say anything. It's just a job. Loose lips sink ships. So nobody says anything, and nobody asks for information either. So it's a very organically cloistered environment. And I think in those conditions, it's very easy to keep big secrets secret. And I think that's a dynamic that has to be taken into consideration about how did D.B. Cooper still stay unknown for 47 years.
Has anybody ever asked you if you was D.B. Cooper?
If I was D.B. Cooper?
I don't know why that just went through my head for some reason. Ask him if he's D.B. Cooper.
No,
maybe he is. He wrote a book about himself. I don't know.
No. I was 22 when the jump happened. One of the unusual circumstances of the D.B. Cooper skyjacking is that Cooper was an old guy. The first reports coming in to the FBI was that the guy was 60. But the flight attendants narrowed it down. He said he was in his mid-40s. Now, as it turns out, all the other skyjackers, the copycats, they're all in their young 20s. This crazy kind of skyjacking is the kind of thing that young, stupid guys do.
I was just fixing to say that. It doesn't sound
right.
Yeah.
No, when you hit 45, no, you're thinking different things. No. But when you're 45, you have a lot of friends who would jump in a four-wheel drive and park themselves out in the woods for you, waiting for you. And you'd have a lot of skills.
Like a Jeep, grab a Jeep Wrangler or something like that. Yeah, we got to take a break here. But, yeah, I could see that. I see commandos in a Wrangler waiting on him to drop, grabbing him and getting the hell out of there.
There's another D.B. Cooper author by the name of Jeffrey Gray who came out with a book called Skyjack in 2011. Just before he went to publication, Jeffrey was contacted by a guy who calls himself Jake. And Jake says he was one of the drivers for the extraction team.
Okay, cool. Can we talk about that when we come back? That's pretty cool, actually. Yeah. All right, we'll be right back. Maybe the guy's right. Maybe he had help.
Yep.
Listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
This is Rev Dan Lopez from Spiritual Warrior Today Radio, and you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM.
Ahoy there, Gigi here.
And I'm Cortana, and we're here to take you on a journey through all things paranormal, metaphysical, ufology, and even psychedelic on our show,
Shift Happens, live every Friday night from 7 to 9 Pacific. That's 9 to 11 Central, right here on the Fringe FM.
And remember, don't feed the archons, feed ducks instead.
Duck up.
Occult Arcana is a balanced and objective guide to those subjects considered a part of the nature of light and darkness. Addressed in this text is a compilation of material that will provide new perspectives and awaken latent abilities that we all possess. The content herein shall provide magical sustenance for adept and novice alike, and will help strengthen the cornerstone of mystic understanding and alchemical transmutation. If you are interested in this modern grimoire, you can find detailed information and ways to order by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. Although esoteric and occult studies remain vast, they are rooted within a universal philosophy that is difficult, if not impossible by finite terms, to explain in words. Language places restriction and erects barriers to understandings. By this it is to be understood that there are some things man should consider far too sacred to profane with definition. For these concepts and the manner by which we live our lives, we shall take a note from the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. Quote, "Silence is better than unmeaning words." End quote. To get your autographed copy of Occult Arcana today, simply visit www www.thesecretteachings.info or email The Secret Teachings at rdgable@yahoo.com.
You're listening to Live Talk with Alex Exum.
Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
If you have hard water, the Lime Scale not only leaves white spots, it clogs pipes and breaks down appliances, costing you hundreds of dollars in energy and wear. Eliminate Lime Scale and other water issues like brown staining and bad odors with HydroCare water products available from Wave Home Solutions. Wave's affordable water systems don't use salts or chemicals. You'll love the way your water tastes, smells, and looks. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, go to bestwater123.com. That's bestwater123.com.
Times are changing. The circus of politics, healthcare's low standards and high prices, and let's not forget food quality. What to do? Arm yourself with Life Change Tea at GetTheTea.com. In a world of chemical imbalance and poor air and water quality, it's time you make a move. Log on to GetTheTea.com and stock up on organic non-GMO supplements. Don't forget the tea. Cleansing your body never felt so good. And we have a brand new tea called Takedown Tea, which helps support healthy glucose. All natural body support so you can be at your best, naturally. All you have to do is log on to GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. We're not a fad that comes and goes. We are the real deal. Join us and armor up. GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. Changing America's health one tea bag at a time.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. Tonight we're going down the rabbit hole of the D.B. Cooper case with Bruce Smith. It seems like I got more questions than I got answers here, but that's the beauty of it. And here, listen, on the Fringe FM, we're not just a paranormal radio station. We love mystery. We love everything. Everything fringe. Conspiracy, alternative news, culture, mysteries especially. We got to bring that back. And I don't know. Maybe it's because I watched Unsolved Mysteries so much when I was a kid. But you brought up before when we came. Oh, by the way, if you want to call in at 1-800-588-0335, I don't know if I was listening. It'd be hard for me to call in too because, geez, Bruce, you've covered so much about this case. I can't think of a question anybody would have that could top the information that you've given us already. But you brought up before we went into the break that, there actually was some guy, and I'll let you tell the story, that said he was a part of the extraction. Or didn't that what you said before we went to break?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Anyway, this is the story that I've heard. And it's a public story. An author, Jeffrey Gray, wrote in a book called Skyjack, which has to do with the D.B. Cooper skyjacking. The book came out in 2011. It's an excellent book. I highly recommend it. By my book first and then by Jeffrey's. At the end of his book, he writes that just before he went to publication, he got an email from a guy who he calls Jake. It's an alias. And Jake told him a story. And here's the story. Jake said that he was being held a week before the skyjacking. He was doing time for a fraud conviction at Walla Walla state penitentiary in Walla Walla, Washington, which is the maximum, really heavy duty, no fooling around kind of place. He said he got invited to an interview with a suit, somebody that didn't identify himself but was clearly a government official, week before the skyjacking. And he said, I've got a deal for you. If you are willing to drive a vehicle for us, position yourself in a location that you're familiar with because you were born and raised in southwest Washington, we're going to give you a vehicle and a location, and we want you to pick up a middle-aged white male Caucasian sometime in the evening of November 24th. If you're willing to do this, we will then commute your sentence. Jake told Jeffrey that 2 days before the skyjacking, he was suddenly released from prison on a temporary furlough for 2 days and given an envelope and instructions. And he went and picked up, I believe it was a Jeep Wrangler, and told to go park in Amboy, Washington at the corner of Bunksome Hollow Road and West Creek Drive. And if he saw a middle-aged white male walking down the woods any time after 6 p.m. or before sunrise, to pick him up and give him a ride to a location. Jake did not disclose what the location was. And then to keep his mouth shut. And he did that. And Jake said, I never saw anybody. I didn't pick anybody up. And when I returned to the state prison and returned the Jeep Wrangler, as I walked in the door, I was handed an envelope. And inside was my release. And his sentence was terminated.
Wow. So that means there was some involvement in the higher ups for sure.
Exactly. And Jeffrey, the icing on the cake, Jeffrey investigated Jake, and everything that Jake told him that could be corroborated and investigated was true. Jake was in Walla Walla for a fraud conviction. He did receive a temporary 2-day furlough on November 22nd, 2 days before the skyjacking. And upon return on the morning of November 25th, his sentence was commuted. He was a free man. So that is true.
I believe it. I mean,
I do too.
You've seen the movie that came out with Tom Cruise where they talked about the Barry Seal, thing where he's in the courtroom and he's like, he's telling of course I'm from Arkansas, so that movie really hit home with me, but he's telling the prosecuting attorney of Arkansas, he's like, I'm going to walk out of here. And he's telling all the cops, the FBI and everybody, I'm going to walk out of here, and just laughed at him, offered to buy him a Cadillac and stuff. And he did. So, I mean, there's no telling what's really going on with that, especially after that whole Barry Seal incident, after seeing that.
Okay, you're gonna have to refresh my memory about the movie and everything like that. But Tom Cruise and
it's the and I forget the name of the case, but where the guy was running drugs for the government and then the CIA, and he was dropping off cocaine in Mena, Arkansas, and the Clintons were involved, and they made a movie about it. And I forget the name of the movie. I think it's called American Made. I believe that's the name of the movie. And Tom Cruise plays Barry Seal in that movie.
Okay. All right. I haven't seen the movie.
It just seems like more movies are coming out that reveal stuff.
Yes. Yeah. So I think, and that's the genesis of shows like yours and Coast to Coast and everything like that. And I think it's our job to find out exactly how real is all of this and how much of it is amplified or trumped up or distorted or it's just too crazy.
I mean, it's like false flags. I mean, people talk about false flags almost like, in my opinion, as if they want to believe in them. And I'm not the guy. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I know that some bad things have happened, but I really still to this day don't want to believe that our government would do something like that, kill that many people, all for some type of war agenda. I don't want to believe that. However, all of the stuff kind of adds up. Dick Clark's book, I remember watching on TV where one of those guys over in the Middle East was telling one of our news reporters that, hey, you're not as safe as you think you are. We could attack you very easily. All we'd have to do is just hijack a couple of planes and turn them into missiles. And this was way before 9/11 ever happened. They had plenty of warning, and yet it still happened. I mean, something's fundamentally wrong there, and I think your point about jurisdictions and all this other stuff has a little bit to do with it. I'm not trying to talk down about government officials, but there's something wrong in there that's not working.
Yeah. Before we go too far afield from D.B. Cooper, I want to talk about some of the stuff that's happening in D.B. Cooper world right now.
Sure.
Ready to shift gears?
Absolutely.
Okay. First of all, I want your listeners to know, that there's going to be a D.B. Cooper conference, a symposium in Portland this coming Thanksgiving weekend. In fact, it's going to be held on the exact anniversary date of November 24th, 2018. And it's going to be at a yacht club in Portland. The exact location hasn't been confirmed. It'll be confirmed this week. And it's going to be free. So all you got to do is just get yourself there. And you'll be able to hear a lot of the leading speakers from the private investigation side of things. FBI agents have been invited, but so far none have committed to coming, which is typical for the FBI. But you'll meet people who have written other books. Jeffrey Gray has been invited. Hopefully he will be there. I'm going to be there. Parachute experts are going to be there. And we're going to have people talking about the tie and the minerals that have been found, and DNA experts and stuff like that. It's going to be a great time, and come down and hang out with us. It'd be great.
What about Blevins though? He's you mentioned.
Well, you mentioned.
Go ahead.
Blevins is one of the authors who was not invited, and is probably not going to be there, but who knows. Robert Blevins is one of the aberrations in the citizen sleuth community who has become very problematic and adversarial. He threatens people, and the fact that the location is up in the air right now for this conference is because the original site for the location, which was going to be the Portland Yacht Club, Blevins threatened them with a lawsuit if they went ahead with hosting the conference. Now, why would he do this? He was afraid that slanderous comments would be made about a suspect that he champions as D.B. Cooper. Now, this suspect is named Kenny Christensen. Kenny Christensen has been dead for over 20 years. But Jeffrey Gray and Robert Blevins at various times have investigated Christensen extensively and make a compelling case that he could have been D.B. Cooper. I don't think he was. Jeffrey Gray currently distances himself from Christensen as Cooper, and certainly wants nothing to do with Robert Blevins because of Blevins' very troubling behavior. At the heart of it is that Blevins feels that Blevins feels he needs to protect the public image of Kenny Christensen because he wants a movie deal. And he feels that he's got some irons in the fire with either a Hollywood production company or with a UK, a London-based production company called Minnow Films, which has contacted many of us in the Cooper community, including myself, to make a major documentary for BBC television. And that particular production seems to be going forward. So Blevins wants to be part of the action. There's money on the table for him, he feels. Now, what is the concern about this public image about Kenny Christensen? It's not that he stole an airplane or threatened to blow up 40 people and kill them if he didn't get his money. What is at the heart of Blevins' concern seems to be is that Christensen harbored runaway teenage boys in his home in Bonnie Lake for a significant period of time when he was a flight attendant for Northwest Orient Airlines, particularly during the time when he flew routes to the Orient, like Tokyo, Manila, and Hong Kong. When he would return, he would shower these boys with exotic gifts from the Orient and take them out to expensive luxury dinners and restaurants. And these behaviors, under these circumstances, can be arguably presented as grooming behaviors by a sexual predator. And so there's a lot of rumors that abound that Kenny Christensen was a sexual predator and kept a harem of young boys in his house. That is total speculation. Kenny Christensen was never charged with any kind of crime whatsoever. And some of the young boys, who are now men, have been interviewed, and at least one is on the public record and has been videoed as saying he was never abused by Kenny Christensen, and in fact viewed his time with Kenny as being very helpful and very positive. So those are the psychological dynamics that seem to be at play. And at this point, Robert Blevins, in my view, is acting like a crazy person trying to protect an investment of his, or potential investment. So hopefully that whole brouhaha will calm down in the next 2 months. And the rest of us in the D.B. Cooper investigation will be able to talk, share ideas, mingle, meet people, shake hands, and have a few rounds of wine and have a good time. There are some other recent developments in the Cooper world that bear examination. And in the last 6 months, a new book has come out called D.B. Cooper and Me, My Friend and Skyjacker. It's written by a fellow by the name of Carl Lauren, and it has to do with the story that he has written about his best friend, Walter Recca, who died a few years ago, and he says Walter Recca was D.B. Cooper. There is nothing in the book that corresponds to any of the information that we've talked about tonight. There is nothing that parallels or lines up or supports or corroborates any of the known information from the FBI files. It is all a personal testimony and speculation. But Lauren is a force to contend with. He is adamant that he has the truth, and he has a publisher, Vern Jones, of Principia Publication of Grand Rapids, Michigan, who is really quite supportive and has helped produce a 4-hour video on Walter Recca that is available on Amazon, and it's quite compelling. One of the most compelling pieces is that there is an eyewitness in Clay Elum, Washington, which is about a little town up in the hills, 60 miles due east of Seattle. And a fellow up there, a truck driver by the name of Jeff Osidich, says that he picked up Walter Recca on the night of the Cooper skyjacking. And he was coming out of the woods. He was soaking wet, carrying a big bundle under his arm. And he took him to a diner to dry out and get a hot cup of coffee, and ultimately wait for a friend to pick him up by car. Now, I believe Jeff Osidich. I've talked to him. I think Jeff is a straight shooting kind of guy. Now, the question is, what the hell was Walter Recca doing in the mountains in the rain that Wednesday night before Thanksgiving? I don't know. And Lauren claims that Recca had just jumped out with $200,000, and that, in fact, he is D.B. Cooper, was walking out of the woods, and Jeff Osidich helped D.B. Cooper get away. I don't believe him. I don't believe Lauren. I've spoken extensively with Lauren. I've spoken with the publisher, Vern Jones. They are not to be dissuaded. They are true believers in their story, and everything that does not support their beliefs is fake news, and they dismiss it out of hand.
Yep.
And it's very, very difficult to have a conversation with.
I know all about that. I know how that feels.
Right.
But
Now,
what about what you think? Are there any other cases or anything else? I mean, obviously, you're just telling me about some of the cases where people think they know the identity of Cooper or maybe someone close to him. But what do you think? Is there I guess, another identity that maybe you might think is closer, or do you think that anybody knows the true identity of, or is even close to it?
I like to keep my options open. I like to think one of my skills as a reporter is I don't have to prove this. I just have to tell the story. And I report. I am a reporter. So when someone says, Walter Rocca jumped and he landed at Clay Elm, Washington, and he walked out of the woods, and I write that down. That so-and-so said that Walter did this and that did that. And I try to give some supportive information and who I've talked to and who's credible. And I try to give the information some weight. And that's as far as I can go. I don't have to figure out who D.B. Cooper is. I just have to tell a good story. That's my job. Now, in terms of the conference, Walter Recca, Carl Lauren, and Vern Jones will be at the conference. So you will hear a true believer's story for sure. It's going to be like talking to somebody out of the Middle East that's on jihad. I mean, these guys have drunk the Kool-Aid as far as I'm concerned. But also, too, there will be other investigators who, I think I mentioned Frederick Hahnemann, the Honduras skyjacker. There's a lot of investigation going on into his possible involvement as D.B. Cooper doing a second jump, and also to the CIA and what happened to the ransom money and cover-ups and things like that, which will shed light in the overall investigation. Also, too, there has been a renewed investigation of what is arguably the FBI's top suspect in the D.B. Cooper case, and that is a fellow by the name of Sheridan Peterson. Sheridan is 94 years old. He's still alive. He's in frail, problematic health, but he was most famously seen in the History Channel documentary on D.B. Cooper, acknowledging and laughing and enjoying the fact that he was the FBI's top suspect. He has been investigated twice by the FBI for the D.B. Cooper skyjacking, and I have talked with a number of the agents that were involved in the second investigation, and they won't say that he's D.B. Cooper, but they will say, as one agent said, he was the most fascinating fellow I ever interviewed on a criminal investigation. Peterson has got one hell of a story. And there's a fellow by the name of Eric Ulis who has really taken the bit on Sheridan and is really investigating Sheridan Peterson extensively and has found some groundbreaking information, including the fact that Sheridan had at least one secret bank account in the Orient during the time, during the skyjacking and just after the skyjacking. And that suggests that Sheridan Peterson's life was funded in ways that are very secretive and very mysterious. Now, whether he was a skyjacker or he was a criminal or he was running drugs or he was a black marketeer or he worked for the CIA or he was some kind of contract operative, who knows where in the dark world he lived. But it's a good story. So that will be told in full. And Sheridan, unfortunately, even though he's alive, has chosen not to communicate with anybody recently, so we do not know if he will be able to attend the conference and explain any of the details that are coming forward about his remarkable life. And he is definitely one hell of a guy. I've spoken with Sheridan on numerous occasions years ago. He refuses to talk to me. He hasn't talked to me for at least 2 or 3 years. In fact, the last time I talked to him was the day after Donald Trump got elected, and Sheridan told me he was going to leave the country and escape to Nicaragua because he knew that the Trump administration was going to be very problematic, and he didn't want any part of it. And he invited me to run away to Nicaragua with him. We'd live in the hills. And I said, you go first, Sheridan, and pitch a tent. Let me know when you're ready for company. So that's the status there. So the case is 47 years old, but there's a lot happening, and every time you turn around the corner, there's something popping up. So here we are.
Well, I tend to I try to put stuff together in my head. That's why I asked. I know you're just a reporter, and I know it's your job to get as much information from as many aspects of this as you. And you're doing an awesome job, by the way. This is incredible information. But my curiosity, and you don't have to answer, but my curiosity, because you've been studying this so much, makes me wonder: is there a particular person out of all these people that you feel has a better case than everybody else?
No, I don't. But I definitely want to know more about Sheridan Peterson. Personally, I don't think Sheridan is D.B. Cooper. He could be. He's got all the skill sets. But I don't know. But Sheridan has had a remarkable life. And by his own writings, by his own statements, which seem to be verifiable, because I've talked to several of his friends who support all of this, Sheridan spent a lifetime hopping around the Middle East and the Far East, in Vietnam, Nepal, places, Japan, China, a lot of political hotspots. And he seemed to be in places that were just hitting the headlines. He saw the massacre at Tiananmen Square. He was in Iran when the Shah fell. He was in Papua New Guinea when there was a communist insurgency. He has been around the block a number of times, and I believe, and others believe, that he is a form of a CIA operative that you don't see in TV shows and you don't see in Homeland or anything like that, where he is basically an observer. He is a journalist, if you will, for the agency, recording and receiving information and crossing borders, not as a CIA agent, but basically as an eccentric, weird, old hippie journalist kind of guy. And having a conversation with Sheridan can be exciting and bewildering and mind-numbing. And I also think he has a screw or two loose, because by the end of the conversation, he can be calling you a stooge and a jerk and a lot of other nasty things. And it's like, he just turns it on and off. And it's like, my God, who are we dealing with here? So at any rate, I would love to know more about a guy like that. He's a fascinating guy. He's not somebody that you meet every day,
Sounds like it. Yeah, sounds like it for sure. We got to, we're already at the last hour of the show, guys. If you got any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat or call in. A little bit more about the D.B. Cooper case when we come back, guys.
Okay.
Broadcasting The Fringe FM.
listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
How you doing today, guys? This is Garrett Lee.
And this is Randy Warner.
From the Healers and Hellraisers podcast.
A podcast about people.
You're going to hear stories from the enlightening to the frightening.
Told by those who lived it.
Listen right here on the Fringe FM.
Wednesdays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And on the Fringe Free-For-All, right here on the Fringe FM. Who were the real ancient Egyptians? What is it about ancient Egypt that captivates us all? The critically acclaimed series Magical Egypt is back with all new episodes. Let Chance Gardner and company take you on another adventure through Magical Egypt in the new series Magical Egypt 2. Magical Egypt 2 attempts a forensic reconstruction of the science of the ancients through a study of ancient aesthetics. Also, the best researchers and authors in the field like John Anthony West, Graham Hancock, Laird Scranton, Robert Bouval, Lon Duquette, Aaron Cheek, and more join together to explore the topics of the esoteric and the hidden messages of the ancient Egyptians. Just go to magicalegypt.com right now and put in the code word FRINGE and get 10% off any download or order, including the groundbreaking original Magical Egypt series, as well as the new episodes in Magical Egypt 2. Also, check out the great work and the companion series at magicalegypt.com. Click the banner on the Fringe FM or go to magicalegypt.com and use the code word FRINGE and get 10% off your order today while it lasts. Hey Fringe FM listeners, did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or no Wi-Fi available, you can still listen to every minute of the Fringe FM by calling 701-719-3971. No smartphone app or internet needed. Saves your data plan and no extra cost if you have unlimited minutes. Call 701-719-3971. That's 701-719-3971. Listen to the Fringe FM on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Want to know what's on the Fringe FM? Check out our schedule at thefringe.fm.
This is Elle. I listen to Lighting the Void because it's interactive radio with good content, interesting guests, and a humble host, sharing this journey through the esoteric. Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for having us along for the ride.
Thank you so much for a delightful evening.
Well, I got a lot of ground to cover.
Follow The Fringe FM on Facebook and Twitter at The Fringe FM. The Fringe FM loves hearing from you. Have a suggestion, comment, or question? We're all ears. Email talkback at thefringe.fm.
You know, I was telling Bruce during the break that I can't help but root for D.B. Cooper a little bit. I find myself, even in movies, when the villain is pretty smart, you kind of want him to get away with it. There's a lot of movies like that. I think that's why one of the reasons why the D.B. Cooper story is so famous is because he got away with it. And all the little things, at least we think he got away, pretty sure he did. They hadn't found the body, but I don't know. You know what I mean, Bruce? I'm kind of rooting for the guy. I'm kind of. I know it's bad to say, but I'm kind of happy that he pulled it off.
There are even FBI agents who are cheering D.B. Cooper on. They'll still put the cuffs on him, but they'll pat him on the back too, saying, "Nice job."
It's bad to say that, but it's like the perfect villain, the smart guy.
Yeah, no. And I think an FBI agent who can appreciate the skills and the courage and the ballsiness that D.B. Cooper displayed, and an FBI agent like that, he's my kind of guy,
Yeah.
Somebody who just gets sidetracked, he's just a lousy criminal, he's a crook, blah, blah, blah. Well, I don't have much to say about that.
Well, I mean, you got quite a bit of information on this case. I mean, is there anybody out there that is investigating this alongside of you that you think compares to you? Because I mean, only thing I know, and honestly, like Lily says in the chat, I know the basics of the D.B. Cooper case, right? Some of the stuff that you're telling me, I've never heard of. So it makes me think like there's got to be maybe your nemesis out there that's trying to solve the case too, you know?
Well, in terms of assessing who knows what, I would say I probably have the broadest comprehensive view of the case because that's what I write. That's my job. There are others who drill in to various aspects of the case and are much more knowledgeable about particular things. Now, the guys who are investigating the tie, they know a lot more about metallurgy, electron microscopes, the transport of chemicals across fabrics, things like that. And that fellow is a fellow by the name of Tom Kay. He's widely interviewed on a number of documentaries, and whenever news reports come up in the news, somebody's always going to call Tom Kay. Tom Kay is also the director of the Citizen Sleuth Committee that Larry Carr established. And in my book, I have a whole chapter on him. And the work of the Citizen Sleuths is exemplary in the extreme. There's another author. Well, he's not an author yet. He's writing a book, but it hasn't been published. His name is Galen Cook. Galen Cook is an attorney who has been on the case for at least 30 years. He's put $50,000 of his own money into his own personal investigation, and he's examining a lot of what's happening at Tina Bar where the money was found, different kinds of hydrological studies, how water and pressure and dredging and mud and erosion would affect paper currency and the sands and things like that. Galen, as an attorney, has a more advanced and more facile relationship with law enforcement. He gets further in conversation with FBI agents than I do because I'm a journalist and everybody that talks to me knows that sooner or later whatever they say is going to be on the record and in the newspaper or online in the internet. Whereas with Galen, they're talking more with a colleague. He's more like a friend. So Galen has had extensive relationships and conversations with Larry Carr, with the last case agent, a fellow by the name of Curtis Eng, and with also a mysterious fellow by the name of Al D. No one knows who Al D is, but a few years back, there was quite a fluffle about letters that had been uncovered in FBI archives and also in the archives of the Oregonian that were received by the FBI in the days immediately after the skyjacking that were signed by D.B. Cooper. And the question is, are they real? Well, they're real letters, but are they really from D.B. Cooper? Are they really from the skyjacker? Most people discount it and say, no, none of them are real. None of them are legit. But some people do, and some in the FBI are considering it. And Curtis Eng is one of those FBI agents who were giving some of the letters some credence, giving them some weight, and trying to ascertain what it tells them about the skyjacker. Galen was very involved in that study, in that aspect of the case. And everything that I write about in terms of the letters and Al D, I basically got from Galen. Al D is yet another mystery. At this point, Galen and I believe, and many others, believe that Al D is a mysterious FBI agent who was doing an end run around his own agency to kind of smoke out what we knew about the letters and to smoke out D.B. Cooper if he was still alive, assuming, and we believe that this agent who was doing this, who was impersonating himself as Al D, was trying to smoke out D.B. Cooper and believed that Cooper was still alive. So there's mysteries within mysteries here. There is one related mystery that your listeners may be interested in, and that has to do with the money find at Tina Bar. The money was actually discovered at a place called Tina Bar, which was really a beach. In that part of the Columbia River, all the beaches are called bars for some reason. And Tina Bar is just down the river from Frenchman's Bar, which has a big park, and you can go swimming there and everything. Now, the people who own Tina Bar are two brothers by the name of Alan Richard Fazio. And Alan and Richard are still there. They were there when the money was found. So they're long-time denizens of the region. And when I was down there talking to them about the money find, they told me a secondary story about cattle mutilations. 9 years after the money was found at Tina Bar, about 10 of their cattle were mutilated in the traditional cattle mutilation scenario. Cookie cutter, precision kinds of extractions, of surgery done of various organs, lips, eyes, anus, genitals of cattle. No blood was pooled in the wounds. There was no blood on the ground. There was no sign of struggle, and there was no obvious sign of death. There were no bullet wounds. There was no suffocation. There was no poisoning. And Linda Moulton Howe, who most of your listeners know about, called Richard and Al Fazio and said, "Hey, can I come up and see your place? I hear you got some cattle." And they said, "Lady, no thanks. We just went through the Cooper craziness with the money. Now we don't want any cattle mutilation people here." Nevertheless, the Fazios did call in the cops. The cops then called in a forensic team from Oregon State University who did the autopsy and did a forensic analysis of how these cattle died. And as in all the other cattle mutilation cases that I'm aware of, everything was inconsequential, was not proven, nothing was definitive. And of course, the cops put out the narrative like, well, we think it was Satan worshipers that cut up the cows and yada, yada, yada. Which begs the question is, what do these Satan worshipers do when they're not cutting up cattle, and what do they do with the cut up, and where are they going next, and all of that. And there's no legal follow-up. There's no investigatory follow-up on the Satan worshipers, so there's nobody that actually believes it.
Well, I mean, isn't the whole cattle mutilation thing about, there are people talk about Satan worshipers, but the whole story of it is it's almost biologically and scientifically impossible for some of these things to happen to these cattle. So that's why people talked about aliens and stuff. Maybe aliens didn't. Well, maybe D.B. Cooper is an alien. I mean,
possibly.
It's possible. Anything's possible right now.
Exactly. So this whole cattle mutilation thing is maybe the crossover between mysteries like D.B. Cooper. Cattle mutilations are real, but who's doing them? Why are they doing them? And all that. And Linda Moulton Howe is a wonderful lady. I've met her a long, maybe 30 years ago when she was just starting out. And I heard her speak on cattle mutilations, so she was the one that introduced the subject to me when I read her book, Strange Harvest. And I believe she's now believing that cattle mutilations are being carried out by government operatives using retrofitted alien spacecraft that have been back engineered. And it's basically one more strategy to make the population afraid and scared and all of that. And if I understand her correctly. So in yet one more way, we have kind of crossover between D.B. Cooper and the big mysteries of life.
Well, it's something that I respect too. Like Linda, somebody like you, it's something I'm aspiring to be. I mean, journalism to me is where it's at, because I think we're gonna get to where we can absolutely go with what evidence we have that way. And I mean, there's a lot of sensationalism and stuff. I mean, that goes on in this community, but journalism is really the best place to be. That's why most of the journalists like Linda Moulton Howe are, they get the attention they get because they try to get as much evidence as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think she's a solid pro. I respect her greatly. I don't necessarily agree with her in terms of a fear program. I hope that's not true. I shudder to think that might actually be true, but my God, I hope it isn't. So what do you think?
I don't want to think it's true, honestly. I know I told you earlier that somebody put me in the top 200 of disinfo agents or something like that. Like I'm some type of intelligence agents that's getting government checks. So this conspiracy field is, look, I've met all kinds in this community, and it's kind of hard to imagine that some of the things that they talk about that are going on are really going on. And I'm talking about every story you can imagine I've been told, and told in a fashion that it's absolutely true. From people that are living on the moon, inside the moon, people living inside the earth. The government is doing population control. 9/11 has used energy weapons and holograms, you name it. And I don't want to believe any of these things, actually. I think it's interesting to look at. But when I see things like the D.B. Cooper case, the 9/11 report, the fact that, all of the crazy missing information there, I mean, I have to kind of think it's possible. But if you go around spouting off stuff like that, I mean, look what happened to Jesse Ventura. Do you know who that is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, nobody takes that guy. I mean, a few people take him seriously, but he just went out and said, look, I was in the military. We did operations that were false flag, and I kind of know some stuff about that, and told his story, and people think he's a wacko, even though he delivered the information. So I don't understand the conspiracy community, honestly, because I don't think any of them know what to believe anymore.
Well, I would say as a proviso is that whenever you present make a remarkable statement, you have to present remarkable degree of proof. And I appreciate Jesse Ventura's position that, in military and being on false flag operations with the military. But boy, it would be great to verify all of that stuff. I live in a community out here. I go to the Ramtha School, and Ramtha School of Enlightenment in Yelm, Washington. And this whole area, it's like we consider everything. And that's where I heard Linda Moulton Howe speak, was at the Ramtha School back in 1990, I think. And the current question about QAnon and Anonymous and InfoWars, I don't think you can make outrageous statements without an extraordinary amount of proof, verifiable proof. And it's not just to have somebody say, well, I was there and I saw it and I did this. You have to have more than that. Otherwise, it's just speculation. And that's how I write. I will state what people say, but then I will also give a proviso. This person, has no credibility in the community. This person has like Robert Blevins and Kenny Christensen, but nevertheless is a voice to be reckoned with.
Is it because they're sticking to their guns with everything, no matter what and see, I found that too. Like when somebody could come out and say something like Jesse Ventura, let's just take him for example. I did this, I did that, right? Well, from a researcher, reporter, even a scientific point of view, hey, it would be nice if we could measure this somehow or get some type of evidence that you did that. Now, what I've even found in this community a little bit is, and when I say this, I'm not personally attacking anybody, but I've found that you can bring out evidence, and if it's contrary to the story that someone's given, instead of accepting the evidence that you're giving them, maybe because you busted them out or you proved them wrong or something, they'll stick to their story regardless. Oh, you doctored that, or that's not a real document. So it just goes round and round in circles. And so, again, when it comes to journalism, I think this is why people like Bob Woodward, which we were talking about during the break, and other journalists like yourself get real meticulous about what they report, how they do things. I mean, that stuff has to matter. Journalism is an art. It's not just get on the mic and start yakking,
Exactly. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
I don't know if I can do it, but I know that I'm kind of jealous of people like you that can actually do things like this, because it takes a lot of work.
It does. It does. I think of, and I don't do it alone. I have been assisted. My particular skill is that I will do the writing, and writing takes time, and it takes sweat and editing and revising and corroborating and trying to make the pieces fit, the jigsaw pieces fit. But my best skill is that I will pick up the phone, or I will walk up somebody's driveway and go to their front door and ring the doorbell, that I will actually ask for information, even if it means the door's going to be slammed in my face, or the phone, they're going to hang up on me. I keep calling. I keep slugging away. Unfortunately, I get a little short with some people. I wish I was more enlightened. As one person told me, he said, "Bruce, you need to meditate more." Yeah. But I try. I try. I lost my cool today with a public information officer for the Auburn Police Department. And I thought he was acting like a super duper jerk, and he,
well, what happened?
Rattled my cage. I was investigating Blevins. I had come up with some information about Blevins. Blevins has a criminal history. He's on the record for a firearms violation and for a theft of the second degree. He has his own story about what was happening. That sounds very innocent, yada, yada, yada. Nevertheless, I was looking for more corroboration on the whole saga. Blevins has personally threatened me numerous times with lawsuits, physical assault, such as if you come to this party or you come to this FDB Cooper gathering or you show your face, I will have you physically escorted, and you can count on that. There were bomb threats called into a Cooper gathering up in Auburn that Blevins was organizing about 5 years ago, and he told the Auburn Police Department that I was a primary suspect in the bombing threat, and he handed them headshots of me that he got off the internet. And so Robert Blevins is no friend of mine. And but I figured this kind of nuisance behavior was more along the lines of the cost of doing business. If you're going to investigate things, you're going to step on toes. And particularly when you write a book and you start having a modest degree of celebrity status because you're in documentaries and you're on fringe radio or other kinds of public outlets like this, people get jealous. And when people get jealous, they start acting stupid and they start acting mean, and all kinds of emotions come up. So I don't think of myself as a big shot, but I do think that I have enough public status to attract unwanted attention from certain people, and one of those people is Robert Blevins. So, can
I ask you your opinion on something? Only because I'm kind of dealing with this myself. As somebody that's been in the field, and my field's a little bit different. I'm a radio host and a network owner, but I feel like journalism is important. I feel like we need to get back to that place so we can get some answers. But sometimes when you do that, you stir up things, right? Like you make certain people mad in your community, even people with big names, and you don't want to upset people because maybe you're trying to get your name out there, and it's like, you don't want to upset anybody. But however, doesn't a real journalist, aren't they supposed to push through that? Aren't they supposed to push through that no matter how many people are telling you, oh, this is probably bad, man, it might screw up your image, or this could backfire on you, when you're really searching for the truth, especially if you're trying to reveal a truth you already know. I feel like you should push through that because some of the best people have done that.
I agree with you. And I think it's true for anybody at any level of life. You don't have to be a radio host or journalist or writing a book or anything like that. In fact, I think the truth is more valuable today, and it's harder to ascertain than at any time that I can see in modern history. This whole notion of fake news and what is real, what is a fact. In the DB Cooper case, we don't even have total agreement on anything as a fact, other than it happened. So there's a corollary to what we're saying. There's a growing momentum in the storytelling world. Are you familiar with Moth storytelling? NPR radio, thing like that?
I actually listen to it quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay. So the Moth stories are people telling true stories that happened to them. And most of them are transformative. It's like, well, I used to be a drunk and then I went into rehab and now I'm a nice guy. So, at the most simple, okay? But usually they're much more complicated, much more dramatic than that. But at that point, I mean, we weren't telling stories like this on public stages, in coffee houses and things like that. No. It's like almost any time, every week, I know where to go to hear a Moth story somewhere in Seattle or Tacoma or Olympia. And when I go, the places are packed, hundreds of people, and people just hungry to hear people telling true stories about their own personal lives. And you can see the sweat pour off the face, and that they're telling the truth.
Yeah. I listened to another podcast called How Sound, and it's all about storytelling. Not only do they do the storytelling, and I've even told Eric, and I've tried to get other hosts on the network to do storytelling because I'm falling in love with it. But that kind of storytelling where they make it kind of like a play and a drama, but they also really reveal every little detail of the situation. They paint a picture, and it's beautiful, and they're going through something and talking about something they would only talk about with maybe their best friend, and they're just putting it out in public. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. So, clearly that gives me hope, for humanity, that organically so many of us are just gravitating to these kinds of gatherings so that we can hear truth. And I don't think organizations on the alt left are doing anybody a favor, like QAnon, all of these so-called, well, I can't tell you who I am, so that's why I'm anonymous, but I work for the Trump organization, and I know this and I know that, and I have to send everything out in code. When I start hearing that kind of stuff, I get really suspicious. There are a number of people on the alternative left, alternative liberal field journalists, like dark journalists. I've tried reaching out to them personally, making contact, trying to establish some kind of professional relationship. So at least I know I have a personal feel for where this material is coming from, and they're unresponsive to me. I think
that's a good subject, man. I want to talk about that. We got to take our last break, but that's something that you and I could talk about as we wrap up the show, if you don't mind. And
sure.
Yeah, that's very interesting that you say that. We'll be right back, guys, with Bruce Smith. We've talked about DB Cooper all night, and we're going to wrap up the show when we come back. So if you got any questions, put them in the chat or call in. We'll be right back, guys.
This is Cortana from Shift Happens, telling you to pour a glass and park your ass, because you're listening to KTLK, The Fringe FM. Shithead.
Reclaim your active lifestyle with Angioprim. Angioprim is the original liquid oral chelation supplement. Chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in your veins and arteries that can cause blockages. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. Find out more. Go to angioprim.com. Talk to a trained consultant by calling Angioprim toll-free 877-882-7221.
Occult Arcana is a balanced and objective guide to those subjects considered a part of the nature of light and darkness. Addressed in this text is a compilation of material that will provide new perspectives and awaken latent abilities that we all possess. The content herein shall provide magical sustenance for adept and novice alike, and will help strengthen the cornerstone of mystic understanding and alchemical transmutation. If you are interested in this modern grimoire, you can find detailed information and ways to order by visiting www.thesecretteachings.info. Although esoteric and occult studies remain vast, they are rooted within a universal philosophy that is difficult, if not impossible by finite terms, to explain in words. Language places restriction and erects barriers to understandings. By this it is to be understood that there are some things man should consider far too sacred to profane with definition. For these concepts and the manner by which we live our lives, we shall take a note from the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. Quote, "Silence is better than unmeaning words." End quote. To get your autographed copy of Occult Arcana today, simply visit www.thesecretteachings.info or email The Secret Teachings at rdgable.
Lighting the Void is proud to announce Mind and Magic's Protection and Defense Course for protection from magical and psychic attacks. This is not a joke. Magic practitioners are on the rise, and with that comes attacks from baneful or black magicians that try to harm or hurt others for their own selfish reasons. If you are not a believer in psychic attacks, then this isn't for you. If you are, and you want the power to defend yourself and your family and home, then I highly suggest you grab Freighter Xavier's Protection and Defense Course. In this course, you will learn how to tell if you are under attack from a natural source or if an individual is attacking you. The 4 forms of curses and attacks, how to remove self-imposed curses, the correct way to cleanse your home from negativity or malevolent entities, how to make your own holy water, what you should always keep near or under your bed, herbs that banish negativity and promote purity, the most powerful banishing rituals on the planet, and for those that seem to want to harm you the most, how to put your enemies in a hell pit of their own making. You can also learn protection against shadow people and other entities. Or are you just in a bad planetary alignment? Even how to get rid of an enemy using a tic-tac box. It does not matter what your faith or belief is, this will work. Click the banner on the website at lightingthevoid.com or go to lightingthevoid.com/Xavier.
You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
Do you want to lose weight but have no idea where to begin? The Fast Start Diet, a 3-day weight loss plan, is the answer. 3 days of nutritionally balanced, calorie-restricted meals delivered right to your door. No shopping, no measuring, and no cooking. Everything is prepared for you and ready to eat at home or on the go. The Fast Start Diet has all the amazing benefits of intermittent fasting without starving. We've helped thousands of people who have struggled to reach their weight loss goals. Isn't it time we helped you? With the Fast Start Diet, you'll lose weight and feel great.
Find us on Amazon or go to faststartdiet.com and use promo code TALK to get $10 off your first box. As a special bonus, we'll include our #1 rated Lipo3 appetite suppressant spray free with your order. Whatever your diet plans are, start with us at faststartdiet.com.
Does your basement or crawl space have a damp, musty smell? Well, watch out! That's a sign of too much moisture and not enough ventilation. And that can mean increased mold growth and the buildup of harmful toxins and gases. Don't bother with a dehumidifier. It just circulates the same unhealthy air. Now there's a better way to remove these dangers and odors. It's with the computerized Wave Moisture Control Unit that reduces moisture and expels pollutants.
We replaced our old dehumidifier with the Wave unit, and in only 3 weeks, our basement is dry and the musty smell smell is gone.
Wave units require no maintenance, no buckets of water or filters, and costs only pennies a day to run. Breathe better, live healthier with an affordable, no-maintenance Wave unit. Call 888-717-WAVE, 888-717-WAVE, or visit dryhealthyhome.com. dryhealthyhome.com.
Ride the wave. Wave Home Solutions for a healthy, comfortable home.
Are you intrigued by Paranormal Talk Radio? You'll love the new Paranormal Radio app from TalkStream Live. You'll find a great selection of talk shows covering UFOs, ghosts, strange phenomena, and much more. Download the Paranormal Radio app now and start listening to the very best in paranormal talk entertainment, including the network you're listening to right now. The Paranormal Radio app, free in Google Play and the iOS App Store.
Welcome back to Lighting the Void. Tonight we've been discussing D.B. Cooper and the FBI with Bruce A. Smith. His journey into the investigation of this fantastic story, still unsolved to this day. And you had brought something up before we went into the break about trying to ascertain truth, right? Because that's a word that gets thrown around. Like, we speak the truth. I'm the only truth. There's a lot of half-truths and 90% truths out there and 75% truths, and it becomes a very lonely journey once you start going down that road.
Yeah.
Have you found that to be true for yourself too, Bruce?
Very much so. When I first moved out to Washington State in 1990 to come join the Ramtha School of Enlightenment, I also began to have a lot of alien abduction experiences. And are you familiar with John Mack? I was part of the John Mack study of what he calls experiencers. And I think that's a very good way to put it. And when I first came here, my alien abduction experiences were very hot for me. So I was telling everybody. And newspapers wanted to hear about it, and the UFO community wanted to hear about it. And I was talking to crowds. And like in everything else, sex sells, and the hallmark of my alien abduction stories was sex. I was having sex with aliens. And for part of the crossbreeding, the hybrid program, that you hear about.
Right.
And
well, not you. I mean, are you saying you were having sex with aliens?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I'll just make sure I hear
now,
that.
The question is, was I really having sex? All right. And this comes down to the question is, what is truth? I was having, and was I really being abducted, or what was going on? Now, what I was experiencing were lucid dream states. So all of my experiences occurred at night after I had fallen asleep. Now, whether these were super duper dreams, or whether they were sexual fantasies that I was just acting out because I had just left my wife and getting divorced, and I'm coming out, to Washington State and meeting lots of new women who look very exciting and attractive to me. Who knows what all the psychological dynamics were? But the bottom line is, what did I think of my experiences? And for the first year, I accepted them as truthful as I knew them to be. And then I saw who I was attracting, the UFO community, the people. There were chat groups and gatherings and clubs and kind of like almost like AA meetings. People who had been men and women who felt they had been abducted and were having implants placed into their uteruses, or fetuses harvested the whole range of alien abduction storytelling was part of my life almost on a daily basis. And I was celebrated in that community for my stories. And I began to just have this sense, I was overwhelmed by it all. And I just said to myself on some level, this is all too much. This is all caca. This is just too crazy. And I took a step back, and as soon as I disconnected my belief wiring and said, what if this is not true? Maybe this is something else. I felt completely alienated from my experiences and from everybody in the UFO crowd. And I didn't listen to Coast anymore or anything like that. And
you stepped away from it totally.
I stepped away from it, and I began to meditate using the beginning skills that Ramtha had taught me in terms of developing mindfulness and really getting to know yourself through meditation and self-trance work and stuff. And I was really trying to dig into, if these didn't really happen, then what's going on? Maybe I'm crazy, or I am just so horny that I just am like really just nuts about it, or just what is going on? And I became very alone. And there was nobody really to talk to about this, because it was either hot or cold. It was yes or no. It was true or it was a lie, or it was crazy or it's real. And there seemed to be nobody in the middle. There seemed to be nobody that was expressing any kinds of doubts or reservations. And it was discouraging. And but it was the state of mind, it was the place, psychological place, that I needed to be at that time in my life. And I've been in that place for the past 20 some odd years, pretty much.
What do you think happened?
I don't know. I just don't know. Do I think there's a capacity for alien cultures? Are there alien cultures? I kind of believe that. Are they abducting people? Well, maybe. Is there a hybrid race program? Maybe. Is the government doing it and saying it's aliens? Maybe. I just don't know, Joe. I
can tell you this, man. I can't prove it. I don't have a document to prove this. But I just did a show with Amalia Young Karras about the out-of-body experience, the types of things that you run into the astral realm. We've talked to several people from the Monroe Institute. I don't know if you're familiar with Bob Monroe and Journeys Out of the Body, but lots of people are having out-of-body experiences. I talked to Jason Quitt about some of the people that have all these secret space program stories that are going to all these different planets and the cabal and all this stuff, and other people, and they say, well, they don't really comment on it, but what Jason Quitt did say is a lot of times people are having super conscious experiences out of the body, not in this realm, and they think it's really happening, right? Now, Amalia told me, because I've had my own experience with this sexual type energy that people have in the astral realm, where, you just kind of get taken advantage of, but it's not really a bad thing because you feel the same way, and it doesn't happen that way. You have to go back and listen to that show, but we really dove into that. And, what she told me is there's this force out here that kind of sucks that energy away from us, and that the divine union, which is in all the mystery schools, it's the deepest, darkest secret in every mystery school, is the divine male and female union, that energy. And that not only is it puts us in the fourth dimension as far as consciousness goes. I'm not talking about taking a trip, but consciousness. But there's these other things out there that have been kind of leeching that energy off of us, and this is why the world is in such a bad state because of that. And it made a lot of sense. Now, I can't wrap that whole show up in 5 minutes, but when you say things like that, I've talked to Whitley Strieber, who has totally changed his mind about his experience. You know, when he wrote the book Communion, man, that was a scary ass book, right? That's not something you would read to your children about aliens, you know. But yet now he's been to the Monroe Institute. He's gone down the spiritual path. I'm pretty sure he's walked the same path you are, which is a pretty lonely place to be, and realize that there's a lot more to this. And so, yeah, you're right. But when you come back to the community, if you take that step back to the community, what you'll find is it's totally polar. Oh, you had an abduction. Oh, that's all there is to it. You either imagined it or you had an abduction, or you either believe there's aliens or you don't, you know, and that makes things difficult for your journey. It really does.
It does.
So I can't tell you what's going on, but I have a feeling that a lot of the past shows that I've talked about, it's very funny that you're talking about this too. That, I mean, are you still having these experiences today? Does it happen when you're asleep? Do you just wake up somewhere? You know?
No, what I'm having is essentially what I've done over the past 30 years after I had these lucid, you know, sexualized alien abduction kinds of stuff. My decision, and it was almost primal, but now I have more of an intellectual understanding. I really made a commitment that I wanted all of my experiences to be grounded. I wanted them to be all from me. I wanted, when I had them, I wanted to know how I was having them and why I was having them. Now, I consider myself an adventurer. I have been on a spiritual quest for 30 years here at the Ramtha School. I have made a lot of changes and a lot of sacrifices to advance myself in consciousness, in mindfulness. And I'm not sorry I had alien abduction experiences. I consider it just a stepping stone, part of an initiation, perhaps, as it were. And what I'm having now, I've developed the capacity over the past 20 years to begin to see beings and energy forms in what I call the in-between, in the space between me and physical objects. So what most people would just say, well, that's just the air, or that's space, you know. So, well, Ramtha has taught me how to see beings and energies that exist that are invisible to the general human eye. And it's a question of how to train one's mind to perceive things that vibrate at unusual levels that are not typical to the human experience. And that was a remarkable undertaking and a wonderful experience. But I got to tell you, after a while, I got bored because my real life sucked. I was broke. I couldn't pay the rent. I was lonely. I wanted a girlfriend. I wanted my life to be better. So what I did was I took the techniques, the capacity to see orbs and shimmering lights and glitter and all kinds of squirmy lights going around and 0-point energy and things like that. I took the capacity to see that, the mystic, the capacity to touch, access the mystical. I switched it and I refocused it on a better life in the seen world, what people would call the real world. And I became a journalist, and I started working part-time for the Stagehand Union in Seattle. And my life got much better. I loved working with those guys up in IATSE 15 in Seattle. Really true blue guys, loyal, hardworking, smart, great conversationalists, wonderful guys to hang out with. I love being a journalist. I love making a difference and seeing people read my stuff in the paper. I really felt good about myself. I was getting great feedback. I could see my creativity blossoming. And I've taken all those capacities these days, right now. And it's like, what do I want to do now? And what I want to do now is I want to tell stories. And so I've started with the D.B. Cooper story. And now I'm telling you about interdimensional experiences and knowing how I got there. I know how I saw orbs. I know how I saw the glitter. I know how I saw the flying V's and the other shimmering lights. And I can retrace every step of the way. And I feel really secure and very, very pleased and proud that I can do it. And I think I'm heading in the right direction. And being able to tell you this in a broadcast, for me, is in effect one of the pinnacles of my life. So I thank you.
Yeah, man, that's really cool to hear. That actually is. It's now you don't get to hear people come out and tell what their passion is, but I'm really glad that you're saying that, because these moth type, are you calling them Mothman or moth stories?
Well, the organization that's leading the way is called mothstories.com or
right.
moth.org, I think it is. And the podcasts are, people call them the moth stories. So
man, I listened to a guy talk about on How Sound, and I don't know if it's related, and it's not paranormal at all, but he told a story about his struggles just riding a bike and all the psychological stuff he went through. Now, I mean, I don't know how you could tell a story about riding a bike and make it personal and make it so compelling that you can't. I couldn't get out of the car while I was listening to it. This guy was just admitting one thing after the other, and it was a true art form that you would never hear any. Like I said, only stuff people would say to their best friend, and this stuff is coming out in droves out on the internet, and everybody's attracted to it, and it's a good thing, man. It really is.
It is. It's a great thing. It's a great thing. And I think it leads the way for our future. People say, "Oh my God, Trump," or "Oh my God, Hillary," or whatever, or what's going to happen. I think what we're developing is a new pathway to a new kind of existence, and I champion it. And it's starting with truthful storytelling, and perhaps remote viewing and solving the D.B. Cooper case is not far behind.
Man, it'd be great if you was the guy that solved it. I got to think, though, that if D.B. Cooper is still alive right now, he does know how to use the internet. And I'm probably sure that every day he Googles. Makes you wonder if he's listening right now. That'd be crazy, huh? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think he is, but it'd be wonderful. And maybe one day he'll give us a call. Maybe he'll
call in and say, "I'm D.B. Cooper."
Hey, you don't want to call me DB. I call him Danny Boy. You don't want to call me Danny. Call Joe down in Arkansas.
Yeah, I should have did the old Art Bell thing. If you are DB Cooper, call this line. He used to ask people if they were vampires and stuff to call in. But no, man, I'm glad you're on that path. And I will say this, and I know because I'm saying it, that that other people will offer this to you too. And I run the Fringe FM. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking just to put a bunch of warm bodies on my network. I'm looking for people that are truly authentic, that are not afraid to say what's on their mind, that are not afraid of the crowd. They're not just worried about their image all the time. It's time for that. And so I'm saying right now in the public, if you ever want to put that out in audio format and you really think, I know you're talking about doing books and stuff, but it ever crosses your mind to do that in audio, give me a holler.
I will. Let's get something together. I want to tell stories.
Yeah, storytelling's good.
Together. Yeah.
We only got like a minute left, so can you tell everybody where they can find your book or what you got coming up next and all that good stuff?
The best way to get a hold of D.B. Cooper and the FBI, case study of America's only unsolved skyjacking. Best way to get it is through Amazon. You can get it through your local bookstore, but they're going to have to call Amazon and buy it from them. So, but that's good for the local bookstore. So, and it's all good for me. So I'm going to make a couple bucks on everything. So it's all good. And I also have a book on stories called True Stories, Stories from the Journey, from the suburbs of New York City to Ramp the School of Enlightenment to the storytelling stage. That will be a collection of my true stories. I have 45 stories that are in the can. They're written down, and now I'm getting it ready for publication. And they're going to be made into stories. So a few of them are all up on YouTube, and I'm developing a website. It's not up right now, but it should have some MP4 storytelling going on. And Joe, whatever we put up together, that'll be something else.
Right on, man. Thanks for coming out. We'll have to do this again. It was a real pleasure.
Indeed.
Now, tomorrow night, guys, you know what? Tomorrow night's subject is just going to be just as cool, a little different than this one. But I'll let you wait till tomorrow until I put the flyer out to see what it is. It's not what you think. This network is going to do a lot of different things than what most people think we're here to do. But I'm not going to ramble. I'm just going to say that the show was produced by the Fringe FM and cannot be rebroadcast without written permission. The music was by Chronox, Bundy, Kevin MacLeod, and Space Station. See you guys tomorrow night.